It was the 9th year of Jingguan in the Great Tang Dynasty. I was walking down the busy streets of Chang'an when I heard a commotion. "Quick, get out of the way. His Highness the Prince of Shu is coming," a pedestrian hissed, nudging a nearby vendor. The vendor didn't seem too bothered. "What are you afraid of? The Prince of Shu doesn't bully commoners like us. I heard he's going to find the eldest son of the Zhangsun family to cause some trouble," the pedestrian whispered back. That did it. The vendor didn't say another word. He packed up his stall instantly and dragged it toward the inner edge of the street. Everyone knew I was good to the people. I'd helped refugees and never picked on the poor. But if I was going to fight the sons of the nobility, that was a different story. Zhang Sun Chong, the eldest son of the Zhangsun clan, was the unluckiest of them all. Before the 5th year of Jingguan, he only got a beating from me 7 or 8 times a year. But ever since the news broke that Princess Changle was supposed to marry him, his life became a nightmare. I ruined the wedding arrangements and made sure he got a beating at least once a month. Rumor had it that last month I thrashed him just because he stepped into a shop with his left foot first. "You people are slandering me," I muttered to myself as I walked past. I was feeling a bit frustrated. I didn't have time to deal with Zhang Sun Chong today. Besides, last month wasn't about his left foot. It was because he stepped into that shop, saw me, and actually tried to back out. I couldn't let that slide. Today, I had bigger fish to fry. I was going to have a showdown with my cheap old man, the Emperor. I wanted to take up my post in Ezhou. I had been in this world for over 8 years, and the cheat in my head was finally ready. Tucked inside my robe was a gun of truth that definitely didn't belong in this era. With that in my pocket, I felt like I could take on the world. I was done with Chang'an. My father had started grooming Li Tai recently, and the eldest brother and the 4th brother were fighting like cats and dogs every day. It was exhausting to watch. Neither of them would end up as emperor anyway, so why bother? I didn't want any part of that mess. Being an emperor meant waking up earlier than a rooster and sleeping later than a dog. No matter how hard you worked, some official would find a reason to scold you, and you couldn't even talk back. Ezhou was much better. It was the Chengdu Plain. The mountains were high, the emperor was far away, and the roads were difficult to travel. Being a local king sounded a lot more fun. I wouldn't have to manage the boring paperwork, but I'd still be the boss. "Your Highness," a bold villager called out from the side of the road. "I heard Zhang Sun Chong hasn't left his mansion yet. Maybe you should wait for him." I laughed. "Look at you, giving me tips. Don't ruin my reputation. I'm a man of culture, a scholar. I'm not going to fight. I'm going to reason with people." The crowd erupted in laughter. A man of culture? Reasoning? Even the chickens in Chang'an would laugh at that. Everyone in the Great Tang knew that while I had the face of the emperor, I had the personality of a brawler like Cheng Yaojin. Actually, even Cheng Yaojin reasoned sometimes. I didn't. If I could use my fists, I never wasted words. I ignored them. They didn't understand me. As a soul from the future, I knew the history books were just cold words. To survive here without getting executed for breaking some obscure rule, I had to strike first. I made myself so busy and so rebellious that everyone just got used to it. Once you're known for being a troublemaker, people stop caring when you say something out of line. I put a lot of effort into building this reputation. It was a path paved with my own blood and sweat. I really wasn't going to beat up Zhang Sun Chong today. Even though I hadn't hit him yet this month, tomorrow would be soon enough. I didn't like riding in carriages. The wooden wheels in this era were pure torture. Since arriving, the only thing I hadn't given up was exercising and practicing martial arts. My body was strong, it had to be. If it wasn't, I wouldn't have survived all those beatings from my father's military cane. There was no court session today. When I reached the palace near the Taiji Hall, I grabbed a passing eunuch. "Is my father in the Liangyi Hall?" I asked. The eunuch jumped, startled by the sudden hand on his shoulder. He turned, saw it was me, and let out a long breath of relief. "Your Highness." "Yes, His Majesty is handling state affairs in the Liangyi Hall." "Are there any other ministers there?" "No, just His Majesty." "Go back to your work," I said, patting him on the shoulder. As I walked away, the eunuch wiped sweat from his forehead. People called me a thug, but I was actually quite kind to the servants unless they messed up badly. If he had run into the 4th prince without bowing first, he'd be lucky to keep his skin. Before I even reached the door of the Liangyi Hall, I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Dad, I'm here." I'd been calling him Dad in private for years. Li Shimin was used to it by now. In the Great Tang, formal titles were a headache, and the informal ones like Yi or Elder Brother just felt wrong to me. So I used Dad, an older term from the Three Kingdoms era. Inside, Li Shimin felt a headache coming on. He wasn't like this, and my mother, Consort Yang, wasn't like this either. How did they produce a son like me? If I didn't look exactly like he did when he was young, he probably would have questioned my bloodline. But compared to all the trouble I'd caused over the years, calling him Dad was the least of his worries. He didn't even tell me to come in. He knew I didn't care about rules. Sure enough, the door creaked open, and I strolled in. "Why are you here again?" Li Shimin asked without looking up from his scrolls. "Look at you, Dad. Do I need a reason to visit my own father?" I grinned and pulled up a chair right next to him. "I just wanted to see what you're eating and how your health is." I sat down heavily. I should mention, the chair was my invention. I didn't know how to make glass or soap. I was an electronic engineering student in my past life, which was useless here. But I knew how to make a comfortable chair. These little luxuries were easy for me to whip up. Sitting on those traditional floor mats in the Great Tang was pure torture, and the stools weren't much better. Once I made the first chair, I naturally gave one to my cheap dad, so he could enjoy it too. From there, the design started spreading across the empire. Li Shimin looked up at me and sighed. "If you just stopped making me angry, that would be enough," he said, sounding annoyed. But I knew him better than that. Deep down, he was actually pleased. Sure, I was a bit of a troublemaker, and my personality was more like the rough-and-tumble generals like Chung Yaojin or Yu Qigong than a refined prince. But I had a pure heart, and that moved him. As the emperor who had seized the throne during the Xuanwu Gate incident, Li Shimin lived with a hidden terror. He was terrified his own sons would follow in his bloody footsteps. He craved genuine family affection, but as the emperor, he had to maintain his cold dignity. Most of his children were too scared to even breathe loudly around him. Except for me. I was blunt. I never hid anything from him. If I needed help, I'd just barge in and demand it. I hit him right in his soft spot. We were father and son. Why act like strangers? Even though he looked disgusted on the outside, I knew he was most relaxed when he was with me. Hee. So, Dad, does that mean you're in a good mood today? I asked with a sly grin. Li Shimin immediately grew wary. What are you planning? Did you mess up again? I looked at him, speechless. Do I look like someone who only comes around when I've done something wrong? Don't you? He squinted at me. Since you were 8 years old, people have been complaining about you every other day. I've lost years of my life being angry at you. I'll die of rage sooner or later because of your antics. That was just me being young and reckless, I said, clearing my throat to change the subject. I'm grown up now. I actually came here to ask for a favor. I thought to myself, if I didn't act like a brat, would I even be able to talk to you this casually? What is it? Let me hear it first, Li Shimin said, as steady as a mountain. He wasn't about to fall for a trap. He knew if he agreed before hearing the request, there was no telling what nightmare awaited him. I want to go to my post, I said, laying my cards on the table. Li Shimin blinked, stunned for a second. Your post? You mean Ijo? I nodded firmly. Exactly. He frowned, looking at me with deep suspicion. He clearly thought I was brewing some new scheme. Why else would I want to leave the comforts of the capital? No other prince wanted to go to their assigned lands. Chang'an was where the luxury was. Why the sudden urge? He asked. It's not sudden. I've thought about it for a long time, I said, deciding to be brutally honest. I just don't want to get caught in the middle of the fight between Big Brother and the fourth prince. It's annoying. Sometimes, you have to say the things no one else dares to. I had Li Shimin's temperament figured out. In history, the crown prince, Li Chengxian, would eventually rebel, but he was driven to it. My father was already starting to give the fourth prince, Li Tai, hope that he could take the throne. The tension between them was already thick. Li Tai was being given high-ranking positions left and right. Next year, he'd probably be named Prince of Wei. The pressure on the crown prince was becoming unbearable. Being the emperor was a nightmare. Who would want that job? What have you heard? Li Shimin's brow furrowed. I don't need to hear anything, Dad. There are no secrets between us, I said dismissively. It's about the crown prince. Everyone is whispering that you want to replace Big Brother with Li Tai. The rumors have been flying for ages. I know you know. Bang. Li Shimin slammed his hand on the desk and stood up, his face red with fury. Nonsense. Who told you to say this? If any of my siblings had been standing there, they would have been shaking in their boots. But I'd spent 8 years learning his rhythm. If a minister said this, he might actually kill them. But with his son, he was just acting. Dad, stop it. Don't be angry, I said, shrugging my shoulders. I've grown up with you yelling at me. Besides scaring me, what else are you going to do? If I'm wrong, just give me 20 lashes to let off some steam. Li Shimin's manufactured rage instantly deflated. He sat back down, looking defeated. I had officially broken his spirit over the years. If you have something to say, say it. If you have a fart, let it out, he grumbled. He wasn't above using crude language. He'd spent half his life leading soldiers who swore like sailors. Nothing much. I just want to go to Ijo. I don't want to be part of this mess. I just want to be a carefree prince, I explained. Don't you have any ambition? Li Shimin looked like he was about to have a stroke. You came all this way just to tell me you want to be a lazy royal? Dad, let's be real. It's not about ambition. Big brother is still the crown prince. Even if you did replace him, would I even have a chance? I ignored his changing expression and kept going. Since I don't have a shot, I might as well enjoy my life. As the poem goes, when things go your way, enjoy them to the fullest. Don't let your golden cup sit empty under the moon. A golden cup under the moon, Li Shimin repeated, momentarily stunned by the verse. Behind him, Chong Ling, the head eunuch, was breaking out in a cold sweat. As the emperor's most trusted attendant, he'd seen everything, but every time I showed up, his heart nearly stopped. I was the only person in the world who dared to speak like this to the emperor. Anyone else would be dead. I had earned this privilege through years of beatings, being grounded, and having my allowance cut. No one else had the guts. Li Shimin looked me up and down with a strange expression. It was like he was seeing me for the first time. He suddenly remembered that even as a child, I had always been different. I knew my father was frustrated. I might be a rascal, but my grades had always been excellent. He looked at me, his eyes searching for a spark of ambition that wasn't there. If anyone else had dared to talk to him about the succession, he would have had their head. But with me, Li Ku, it was different. I was a lost cause in his eyes, a loose cannon who had even discussed deposing the crown prince right in front of my big brother, Li Chengxian. Dad, stop lying to yourself, I said, rolling my eyes. Just look at one thing. Who is my mother? She's a princess from the previous dynasty. With that bloodline, do you really think the ministers would ever let me be the crown prince? Let's not kid ourselves. Li Shimin's face reddened. If it were anyone else, he would have ordered 100 lashes by now. But with me, it was useless. I'd been beaten since I was a kid. Military canes were like a daily meal to me. They had lost all their deterrent power. He'd tried being ruthless before, ordering the guards to strike me until my skin was raw and bleeding, but my stubborn personality never shifted an inch. You can't kill your own son, so what else could he do? Still, my bluntness caught him off guard. Who said that? He barked, sounding more annoyed than truly angry. I am the emperor. I decide who the prince is. What does your mother's background have to do with anything? Really? I don't believe you, I said flatly, giving him a skeptical look. You're going to be the death of me. He looked like he was about to explode. What is that tone? You look down on your own father. Oh, come on, Dad. I'm not here to beg for the throne. To be honest, even if you handed me the emperorship on a silver platter, I wouldn't take it. Just let me go to my post in Ijo. He stopped, his anger momentarily replaced by genuine confusion. Why didn't I want the one thing everyone else was killing for? Tell me why, he demanded, his eyes narrowing. Tell me why you don't want to be emperor, or you're taking 40 lashes home with you today. Because the hours suck, I blurted out. I almost said I didn't want to wake up earlier than a rooster and sleep later than a dog, but I caught myself. I'd been in this world for 8 years. I knew when a beating was actually coming. Sleep later than what? Keep talking, Li Shimin sneered. He knew me too well. He knew whatever was about to come out of my mouth was going to be trouble. I cleared my throat and put on my most sincere face. I mean, I could never sleep later than the night watchman, like you do. You work so hard for the people of the Great Tang, like a silkworm spinning until it dies, or a candle burning itself to ash for the commoners. You faced the great families and the noble clans with such sacrifice. You truly point a finger at 1,000 enemies and bow like an ox to serve the children. I just don't have that kind of spirit, Dad. Li Shimin stared at me, his expression turning strange. Where did you steal those lines from? Steal? Me. I stood tall. I am the son of the former Prince of Qin, the current Emperor of Tang, and the future Heavenly Khan. Why would I need to steal poetry? Fine, fine, he muttered, waving a hand to stop me. My sudden flattery was making him uncomfortable. So your point is you just want to leave? You don't want to be involved in the mess here, I get it. But why do you have to leave the capital to stay out of it? I sighed, feeling a bit helpless. Dad, have you ever heard the saying? Once you're in the world of men, you are no longer your own master. I'm just trying to survive. He looked me up and down. I was laying it on thick, but he seemed impressed by my sudden burst of literacy. Leaving isn't impossible, he said slowly. But your position is great governor of Ijo. If you go, you have to take full control of the military and the administration. You'll be responsible for everything. No, absolutely not. I interrupted, sounding desperate. Dad, listen to me. That's a terrible idea. If you give one person all that power, they'll just oppress the locals and lie to the throne. It's a recipe for rebellion. You need to separate the military from the government. The generals handle the fighting. The officials handle the money and the rice. They need to rely on each other to function. That creates balance. I was on a roll now. And if you're worried about generals getting too powerful, just rotate them. Build a military school. You be the principal. Train the middle-ranking officers yourself so their loyalty is to you, not their generals. As for someone like me, a prince with high status, it's better if I have no real power. That way, I can't get any bad ideas. Just give me a title, let me go to Ijo, and send your own people to actually run the place. It's safer for everyone. Li Shimin and his head eunuch, Chong Ling, were staring at me like I had grown a second head. It was like watching a brute suddenly give a masterclass on political science. My ideas were brilliant, and I could see the gears turning in my father's head. But then he realized my true motive. I wasn't doing this for the empire. I was doing it so I could be a lazy, do-nothing royal. You total scoundrel, he yelled, his anger returning. I've worked my life away for this country, and I raise a son like you? Look at yourself. You think anyone would even try to recruit you into a conspiracy with the way you act? The only reason anyone even notices you is because of that Yahello trading company you started. He looked at me with pure disappointment. Don't you know the hierarchy? Scholars, farmers, artisans, and then merchants. Merchants are at the very bottom. They are looked down upon by everyone. And yet, you spend every day digging for coins like a common peddler. That's rich, Dad, I shot back. Everything you eat, wear, and use, does any of it exist without money? That's what merchants do. How do the people in Chang'an get goods from all 360 prefectures? Merchants. You can't eat the meal and then curse the cook. Li Shimin's eyebrows shot up. Are you begging for a beating today? I nearly jumped out of my skin. When he said he'd hit me, he meant it. Wait. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I held up my hands. Look, we're the royal family. The whole world belongs to you. That scholar-farmer-merchant stuff is for the commoners to believe, not you. Think about it. Farmers are the foundation, sure. But what about the artisans? Every tool, every piece of clothing, every bridge and ship in the Great Tang comes from them. Without them, we'd still be farming with sticks and stones. Without them, our army wouldn't have the best blades in the world. They are the ones who build the empire's strength. Look at this palace you live in, the carriage you ride, and the very bowl you use for dinner, I said, gesturing around the room. Every single one of those things was made by a craftsman. They are the backbone of everything we touch. So tell me, why are they stuck in third place? Does that seem right to you? I didn't stop there. I was on a roll. And then you have the merchants at the bottom. Everyone says they're just greedy, but look at the great clans and the noble families. Which one of them isn't secretly running a business? Every high-ranking official has a few shops or inns under their name. Merchants handle the logistics for the entire empire. We only have a few major granaries. Without merchants, how does grain get to a massive city like Chang'an? How does the silk move? Merchants make the Great Tang flourish. They are an essential link in the chain. I took a breath and leaned in, my voice dropping an octave. Now look back at the top of your list. The scholars. The noble clans. Most of them just sit around waiting to die, sucking the blood out of the common people like parasites. They don't know how to farm, and they don't know how to build. They are the biggest pests in the empire, yet they're ranked first. Why? Because they have a monopoly on books. They use education as a tool to control the masses. You might not like hearing it, but dynasties change like flowing water, while the noble clans stay as solid as iron. I had completely let loose. In the past, I wouldn't have dared to say these things, but today I didn't care. If things went south, I'd just run away. With the system in my head, the world was mine to explore. Li Shimin looked at me with a strange, unreadable expression. Have you forgotten? Our Li family is also a noble clan. Aren't we just faking it to fit in? I blurted out instinctively. You. Li Shimin looked like he was about to have a stroke. You rebellious brat. Where the hell did you hear such nonsense? Misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding, Dad. I waved my hands frantically. I meant that our position has changed. We're the royal family now. We represent the country. We have to think about the commoners, so we can't be lumped in with those old clans. I saw an opening and moved fast. That's why, for the sake of the royal family's reputation, I feel it's my duty to take up my post in Ijo. I'll develop the region, make the people's lives better, and they'll all pray for your long life. It's a win-win. No, Li Shimin said instantly. He didn't even blink. I was stunned. I didn't expect him to agree right away, but I didn't expect such a flat rejection either. Why not? You just said I should be doing more work. No reason, Li Shimin said, his eyes narrowing. I'm not dead yet. You haven't fulfilled your filial duties, and you already want to run away? Forget it. Stay in Chang'an where I can see you. But Dad, you're always complaining that I cause trouble here. If I go to Ijo, I'll be out of your sight and out of your mind. Li Shimin gave me a cold, sideways glance. If you're out of my sight, then when I feel like beating someone, who am I supposed to find? I panicked. Wait, look at Li Tai. He's getting so fat. He clearly needs the exercise. Just beat him instead. You want him to take the crown prince's spot eventually, right? As the saying goes, when heaven is about to place a great responsibility on a man, it must first harden his heart and weary his bones. Beating him is basically mentoring him. Li Ku, Li Shimin growled. Are you going to get out of here, or do I need to give you 10 strikes with a staff right now? Not another word. I looked at him, feeling indignant. Fine. You're the boss. You're amazing. I can't win, so I'm leaving. I turned and bolted before he could change his mind. 8 years of experience told me that when my old man looked like that, he wasn't joking. I didn't want my but turned into mince meat for no reason. As I disappeared, Li Shimin didn't tell his guards to keep our conversation secret. He knew me. I was a brat to his face, but I didn't gossip behind his back. However, his heart was far from calm. My personality hadn't changed, but the things I had said today had shaken him. Changlin, Li Shimin called out. The head eunuch bowed low. Your Majesty, you heard everything. Do you think that boy came up with those ideas himself? Changlin hesitated. He knew the emperor wasn't really confused. He just wanted a second opinion. The Prince of Shu might be a bit wild, but he isn't stupid. In fact, he's brilliant. Your Majesty, do you think the Duke of Su is actually a fool? Li Shimin nodded. Cheng Yaojin acted like a buffoon, but he was sharp as a needle. But the things I had said, even the ministers in court wouldn't dare utter them. As for letting me go to Ijo, Li Shimin dismissed it immediately. He enjoyed having me around to kick too much. Out of all his sons, I was the one who actually made him feel like a father, even if I drove him crazy. Meanwhile, I was walking away from the palace feeling incredibly frustrated. My plan had failed. I thought that by showing off some deep insight, my cheap father would at least consider my request. Instead, he shut me down without a second thought. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. I'd been reading him perfectly for 8 years, so what changed? I couldn't figure it out, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I needed to hit something. Where is Zhang Sun Chong? I muttered. I haven't beaten him up yet this month. I bet he walked into the palace with his left foot first today. That's a crime. I headed toward the palace gates, but before I got far, I ran into a group of palace maids rushing in the opposite direction. The one in the lead was one of Empress Zhangxuan's personal attendants. Greetings, Prince of Shu, they said, bowing quickly. What's the rush? I asked. Where's Princess Changle? Your Highness, The Empress has summoned Zhang Sunchong, the son of the Minister of State. We were sent to find the princess and bring her back. My eyes lit up. Zhang Sunchong is in the palace? Where is he? Talk about perfect timing. I was just looking for a punching bag, and he delivered himself right to me. He should be on his way in now, the maid stammered. Got it. Carry on. I waved them off and took off at a sprint toward the gates. The maid stood there in shock. Then, the realization hit the lead attendant. Her face went pale. Quick, go find the princess. I have to report to the Empress. The prince is definitely going to find trouble with Master Zhang Sun. She turned and ran back the way she came. Everyone knew that I hated Zhang Sunchong. We had been fighting since we were kids, and if I caught him today, it wasn't going to be pretty. I knew the fastest way to the Lijing Hall, so I took a shortcut and waited. I didn't have to wait long. My speed was top tier, and soon enough, I spotted Zhang Sunchong walking toward me, escorted by a few palace guards. The moment I saw his face, I didn't think. I just charged. Zhang Sunchong, I roared as I sprinted. Are you still trying to marry my sister? My voice echoed through the corridor, but my body moved even faster. Ever since I crossed over into this world, I might have slacked off on some things, but I never missed a day of martial arts training. I was in peak physical condition. Zhang Sunchong was busy chatting with the guards when he heard the shout. He jumped nearly a foot in the air. When he looked up and saw me barreling toward him like a freight train, his face went completely blank. He didn't even stop to ask questions. He just turned and tried to run. It was useless. He was a frail scholar, and I had been waiting for this. I caught up to him in 3 strides. Your Highness, I was summoned by. He didn't get to finish. Thud! I buried a fist directly into his eye socket. He let out a muffled scream, the rest of his explanation dying in his throat. Realizing he couldn't outrun me, he did what he always did. He dropped to the ground, curled into a ball, and covered his head with his hands. You're getting bold, aren't you? I shouted, throwing a few more kicks for good measure. Running away the second you see me? What am I, a monster? You're asking for a beating. Underneath his arms, I could practically feel Zhang Sunchong rolling his eyes. I knew what he was thinking. He knew I'd find any excuse to hit him. If he hadn't run, I probably would have punched him for not being afraid of me. But he didn't dare say that out loud. Your Highness, please stop. Master Zhang Sun was summoned by the Empress. The guards stood by, looking helpless. They didn't dare intervene. They had seen this movie before. I had once beaten Zhang Sunchong right in front of the Emperor. Sure, I got 20 strokes of the cane for it, but it didn't stop me from doing it again. He saw me and ran. I yelled back at the guards. Am I that scary? He deserves this. Zhang Sunchong looked like he wanted to die. If I weren't a prince and this wasn't the palace, he probably would have started cursing my ancestors. Now, let's be clear, I'm not some weird sister-obsessed creep. But in my past life, I was an only child who always wanted a younger sister. When I arrived in this world, Lizzie was only 6 years old, the peak of cuteness. She was quiet, sweet, and always called me third brother with the most innocent smile. After years of growing up together, I genuinely cared for her. There was also a political reason. My mother, Consort Yang, was a princess from the previous dynasty. Even though Li Shimin favored her, the other concubines constantly sidelined her. My mother was cautious and never complained, so I made sure to stay on the good side of the Empress's daughters. If I was close to the princesses, the Empress would naturally look out for my mother. So, the idea of my sweet sister marrying a loser like Zhang Sunchong? Not on my watch. I had met all 24 officials of the Lingyan Pavilion, and let me tell you, the history books weren't lying about Zhang Sun Wuji. The man was a snake. The Zhang Sun family's behavior in this world only proved it. Besides, if my memory served me right, the historical Li Ku was eventually killed by Zhang Sun Wuji. If someone is destined to kill me, I'm going to do everything in my power to ruin them first. I couldn't let Li Shimin get any closer to that family. Plus, in the history I knew, Lizzie died at 23. I was convinced it was because she was married off at 13. I had already successfully sabotaged the first marriage decree back in the 5th year of Jingguan. Now she was 15, and I heard rumors that Li Shimin was getting ideas again. I felt the weight of the pistol in my robes. If things got really bad, I wondered if I should just take a secret shot at him. But I knew better. Once I revealed a modern weapon, I couldn't take it back. I needed to handle the Zhangsun family perfectly, without putting myself in danger. After leaving Zhangsun Chong with a face like a bruised eggplant, I checked the time. It was time to vanish. If I stayed, the guards would report back and I'd end up with another round of canes to the backside. As long as I disappeared now, I could probably play it off. I was careful with my strength. He'd be swollen for a few days, but nothing was broken. If I hurt him too badly, it would be a provocation to the emperor. Keeping it to a scuffle made it much easier to excuse. As I bolted, Zhang Sun Chong climbed to his feet and dusted off his robes. He winced in pain, but he looked strangely resigned. He was used to this. Ever since the rumors started about him marrying Princess Changle, he'd been my personal punching bag. Master Zhang Sun, one of the guards said awkwardly. I've already informed His Majesty. Let me take you to the imperial doctors. No need. Zhang Sun Chong sighed, waving him off. I'll be fine. The guards just stared. The man had clearly developed a high tolerance for being beaten. Meanwhile, back at the Liangyi Hall, Li Shimin had just received the news. He slammed his hand onto his desk, his face turning a deep shade of red. That brat. He did it on purpose. Li Shimin roared. His attendant, Chong Lin, could only offer a bitter smile. Whether it was on purpose or not, one thing was certain. Since the second year of Jingguan, Zhang Sun Chong had been beaten every single year. Once the marriage talk started, the frequency went up to at least once a month. Honestly, it was already the 9th year of Jingguan, and this was only the second time he'd been hit. That was practically a record for restraint. Your Majesty, Chong Lin whispered. Do you think the Prince of Shu found out about your plans again? I had a massive headache just thinking about my sister's marriage. Back in the 5th year of the Jingguan era, my father, Li Shimin, had already started preparing Li Lizzie's dowry. The plan was to marry her off to Zhang Sun Chong by the 7th year. But I ruined everything. Back then, I stood my ground and told my father that marrying off a girl so young was wrong. I told him it was bad for her health. I even went as far as saying that if my mother hadn't married him so early, she wouldn't be so frail and sickly now. I refused to let my sister suffer like that. For my defiance, I took 20 lashes from a military staff. I was only 14, and they didn't hold back. My skin was shredded and bloody, but I didn't back down. I told him straight to his face. If you marry her off, you'll either have to kill me, or I'll kill him. In the end, Empress Zhangsun couldn't bear to see me suffer anymore and pleaded for mercy. Li Lizzie was her own daughter, after all, and my words had hit home. She was moved that I, a half-brother, would endure such agony for my sister. She knew her own health had been poor ever since she married at 13. Even Zhangsun Wuji had to step in and ask for a delay, claiming I was only acting out of brotherly love. So, the matter was pushed back. Now, it was the 9th year of Jingguan. It was natural for my father to bring it up again. If he started preparations now, the wedding would be next year at the earliest. By then, Lizzie would be 16. That wasn't too young by their standards. To be honest, my father's opinion of me actually improved after that beating. He had staged the Xuanwu Gate incident to take the throne, but he desperately wanted his own children to love one another. My fierce protection of my sister gave him a strange sense of comfort. Back in the hall, Chong Lin didn't dare say much. He secretly suspected I hadn't even heard about the marriage plans this time. He figured I was probably just in a bad mood, and Zhang Sun Chong happened to be a convenient target. Knowing me, that was a very likely scenario. What should I do? Li Shimin grumbled, rubbing his temples. I can't keep her unmarried until she's 20. No noble family waits that long. Perhaps I could privately feel out the Prince of Shu's thoughts. Chong Lin suggested. Even if I couldn't officially stop the marriage, I was a master at sabotage. With Zhang Sun Chong's face currently swollen like a pig's head, a wedding was out of the question anyway. Forget it for now, Li Shimin sighed, waving him off. That brat has already bolted. Go to the palace and comfort Zhang Sun Chong. Give him 100 strings of copper for medical expenses and send the imperial doctors to check on him. Meanwhile, at the Shanshui Pavilion, my sister Li Lizzie was enjoying the view. She was 15 now, a true beauty of the Great Tang. Her maid came running in, breathless and shouting. Princess, it's bad. The Prince of Shu beat up Master Zhangsun again, the maid chirped. It happened right in the palace. Apparently, the Empress summoned Master Zhangsun, and the prince ran into him. A flicker of amusement crossed Lizzie's face, followed quickly by a look of mock worry. Third brother beat someone in the palace again? If father catches him, he'll get the staff again. I have to go plead for him. The nearby maids tried to hide their smiles. It was clear that in this sibling duo's eyes, Zhang Sunchong wasn't even a person worth worrying about. I had spent years whispering in Lizzie's ear about every bad thing Zhang Sunchong did, especially his frequent visits to brothels. No woman wants to hear that about her future husband, princess or not. Don't worry, princess, the maid giggled. The guards went to report it, but the prince timed it perfectly. He finished the beating and vanished before anyone could catch him. Lizzie let out a long sigh of relief. As long as he wasn't caught, it's fine. I had already made it out of the palace gates when my subordinates met me with a carriage. I saw the look on my man's face and raised an eyebrow. Something happened? Yes, Your Highness. Let's speak inside, he replied. Once the carriage door shut, his expression turned serious. News from the Zhangsun Manor. Zhangsun Wuji and the Zheng clan of Xingyang are planning to team up against our Yuelin and trading network. They want to suppress our business to cut off your funding. The Zheng clan controls the main regions where we buy our grain. He paused, then added. Also, Zhangsun Wuji plans to impeach you at the Grand Assembly the day after tomorrow. I leaned back. The Zheng clan. One of the 5 surnames and 7 clans, the elite aristocratic families of China. Their influence was so massive that even the imperial family struggled to marry into them because they preferred marrying amongst themselves. Zhangsun Wuji's wife was from that clan, though she wasn't from the main branch. The famine years are over, and grain prices are stabilizing, I said after a moment of thought. Grain is only a part of our business. Even if we stop entirely, it won't kill us. But we aren't stopping. Tell our people to map out every single business the Zheng clan operates. We're going to compete with them directly. My subordinate looked up in surprise. I usually stayed hands-off with the Uli business, even though it had grown into a giant. Do they think I'm just a thug? I sneered. That old fox Zhangsun Wuji shouldn't think he can push me around. They really think I've spent 8 years in this era doing nothing? I'll admit, I didn't know how to make soap, glass, or advanced farming tools from scratch. But I was a modern man. Before I started building my secret power base, I had to ensure I had a loyal team. And the way I built that team came from a very specific, legendary experience in my past life. Right after I graduated high school back in the modern world, I wanted to find a job. Instead, a friend tricked me into joining a pyramid scheme. I spent my entire final summer vacation trapped in a cult-like marketing organization. I learned exactly how to brainwash people, how to build fanatic loyalty, and how to manage a massive, hidden hierarchy. In the Tang Dynasty, those marketing skills were more dangerous than any sword. Back in my old life, I wasn't just a victim of that pyramid scheme. I was a survivor. I was smart, I was observant, and I learned their tactics faster than they could teach them. Within 2 weeks, I understood their psychological triggers. Within a month, I had climbed the ranks to become a lead lecturer. By the time summer vacation was ending, I had successfully reverse brainwashed the entire branch. When I finally walked out and called the police, the cult members were devastated. Even as they were being led away in handcuffs, they begged me to let them work for me once they got out. When I first arrived in the Tang Dynasty, I felt vulnerable. I had no safety net. So, I decided to use those same marketing techniques to build a team with absolute loyalty. It was easier than I expected. Most people back then couldn't read and were deeply superstitious. I added a touch of prophecy to the mix, predicting the droughts and locust plagues of the 2nd and 3rd years of the Jingguan era. When those disasters actually happened, the effect was terrifying. I didn't even have to do the brainwashing myself anymore. My subordinates handled it for me. My business, the Uli firm, grew into a monster. I had to split it into specialized branches. I created the Longmin Escort Agency, the first professional logistics and security firm in history. I opened a chain of inns called A Certain Inn, which became the largest network of rest stops in the Tang Dynasty. The main firm expanded into every corner of the empire, but its most vital roots were in the western regions and the northern Turkic grasslands. My ranks were filled with brainwashed Westerners and Turks whose loyalty was unbreakable. For 8 years, I kept the firm low profile. New recruits were processed through my orientation system, ensuring total secrecy. The outside world had no idea how massive we really were. They knew I owned it, of course, because a business that big needs a royal backing to survive, and I'd stepped in to solve a few problems over the years. But they didn't know our true strength. "I'll go gather the files immediately," Tianming said, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and relief. He bowed deeply. "Your Highness, do you know how we felt these last 8 years? We've lived in guilt. We've made so much money, yet we've never been able to provide for you. Instead, you've had to protect us. Everyone in the firm has been itching to fight for you. I hadn't needed their money or their blades yet. As a prince, I had plenty. Instead, I used the profits to take care of them, people who were considered the lowest class of society. Before joining me, they were starving. Now, they were well-fed, well-clothed, and living better than most commoners. They owed me their lives, and they knew it." Tianming didn't wait. He leaped from the carriage, grabbed a horse from one of the guards, and galloped off to start the mobilization. As the carriage rattled on, I closed my eyes. For 8 years, a thick fog had occupied a space in the back of my mind. It only cleared yesterday. When the mist finally vanished, I realized what it was. A piece of my old world had been ripped through time with me. In my past life, I was an electronic engineer. I maintained the systems for a national strategic reserve warehouse. It seemed the entire facility, or at least a large chunk of it, had been transported into a void within my consciousness. Last night, I explored the first unlocked area, the main office building. Inside, time stood still. The electronics were dead, and the halls were empty, but every security door was unlocked. I didn't need a flashlight. In this space, I could see everything perfectly, regardless of the light. I had headed straight for the security room where the armed guards used to be stationed. I walked out with a Type 92 pistol and 2 full magazines. The warehouse wasn't a military base, but because it held strategic civilian supplies, a squad of armed police had always been on site. If the entire complex was inside my head, I was sitting on a gold mine of resources that shouldn't exist for another 1,000 years. I decided to dive back in for a deeper look. Outside, no time would pass at all, no matter how long I stayed inside the void. I bypassed the rifles in the security room for now. I didn't have enough ammo to make them sustainable, and they were too loud for my current needs. I searched the offices, finding nothing but useless paperwork, until I stumbled upon a massive freight elevator. My memory sparked. In the real world, the standard elevators only went down 3 floors. This one had a button for a 4th basement level. This area had been top secret, off limits even to me. The elevator didn't have power, so I took the emergency stairs. I searched the 3rd basement level 3 times, looking for the hidden entrance to the floor below. I needed to know what the government had deemed so important that it had to be buried that deep. I finally found a security door tucked away in a hidden corner. It was clever, disguised to look like a standard apartment-style anti-theft door. Luckily, being on the 3rd basement level, the electronic locks were all disengaged. I pulled it open with ease. Behind the door was a fresh set of stairs. I descended to the next level and froze. Before me stretched an arched tunnel at least 4 meters wide. It disappeared into the distance in both directions. I had no idea this underground warehouse even existed. Was this a secret armory? My heart started racing. About 40 meters to my left, I spotted a massive vault door. I ran toward it and threw my weight against the handle. The heavy door groaned open, revealing the space inside. I stepped through the threshold and stopped, confused. It wasn't weapons. It wasn't tactical gear. It was books. Rows upon rows of bookshelves stood in perfect, dense formation. I walked over to the nearest rack and saw labels categorizing them by discipline. The shelf right in front of me was marked Basic Practical Materials. I scanned the titles. One caught my eye immediately because of its strange name, The Barefoot Doctor's Manual, Southern Region Edition. I had never heard of it. The bright red cover gave off a distinct, old-school vibe. I flipped to the back. It was printed in 1970. I opened it, curious to see why the state would stockpile something like this. As I read, it clicked. This book was designed for a specific era to solve medical crises in impoverished rural areas. It didn't waste time on anatomy, physiology, or biochemistry. It was entirely problem-based. It listed every common ailment a person in the South might face and gave direct solutions. It was packed with traditional Chinese medicine prescriptions and even covered things like treating heat stroke in children or handling smallpox and mouth sores. There were detailed illustrations of medicinal herbs. The language was so simple that anyone who could read basic Chinese could understand it. I was stunned. This book was a masterpiece of efficiency. It didn't try to turn you into a surgeon. It gave you the tools to fix 90% of a population's health problems in record time. Most people don't die from rare diseases. They suffer from common ones. My ancestors really knew how to get things done. I looked around and saw different versions for different provinces and even versions translated into minority languages. A few steps away, I found another relic, a friend to military and civilian talents. I grabbed it and flipped through the table of contents. My expression turned weird. The first half was all about shooting down planes, ambushing tanks, identifying mines, and surviving a nuclear blast. The second half, it taught you how to grow wheat and corn, how to raise pigs and ducks, how to fix a tractor, and even how to cook braised pork. The contrast was insane. One page taught you how to induce ovulation in sows and apply fertilizer, and the next was about repairing motorcycles, laying floor slabs, and basic photography. I felt a strange lump in my throat as I turned the pages. These books radiated the anxiety of a specific era, a desperate, driving need to pull an entire nation out of poverty and weakness. They wanted to cram every bit of survival knowledge into the simplest words possible. It was a manual for rebuilding a civilization from nothing, even after a nuclear war. That's why it was here. I kept exploring the shelves. I found militia military training manuals, selected folk prescriptions, and anti-aircraft manuals for civilians. Whether they were kept for a post-apocalyptic future or just as a record, to me, they were divine artifacts. Nearby, I found the engineering section. There were guides on primitive methods for making cement, glass, and other light industrial goods. There were even instructions on how to produce 3 acids and 2 bases, using the most basic equipment. The books were linear. They started with crude, manual methods and slowly scaled up to basic industrialization. Following these books, I could build a complete industrial system from scratch. This was the true weight of a national strategic reserve. They had considered every extreme scenario, including the fact that paper is a safer long-term storage medium than digital files. Looking at these shelves, I felt a surge of ambition. With this knowledge, who cared if I couldn't inherit the throne? Being the richest man in Chang'an sounded much better. I could live however I wanted. I used to worry about not knowing how to make soap, refine tea, or weave high-quality cloth. Now, I had the blueprints for everything. Zhongsun Wuji wanted to play games? Fine. The great families of the 5 surnames and 7 clans thought they controlled the economy? Let's see how they handle what's coming. My Yahello trading company was about to become a juggernaut. I started picking out my first set of treasures. I grabbed books on spinning and weaving, starting from basic looms and moving up to the Jenny spinner. I'd skip the steam-powered stuff for now. The Jenny spinner alone would be enough to revolutionize the Tang dynasty. This was the ultimate weapon. Silk and cloth were already the Tang dynasty's greatest exports, and I was about to break the game. I pulled out blueprints for the flying shuttle loom and the jacquard machine, tools designed for intricate patterns. These were just the basic versions, the starter kit. The library had advanced upgrades, but I didn't need those yet. In any era, the most basic needs are clothing, food, shelter, and transportation. In ancient times, that was all the common people cared about. For food, I gathered books on livestock breeding and seed selection. I suspected there were other warehouses in this strategic reserve that held actual grain and seeds. Unlike the commercial seeds from my time that only lasted 1 season, these strategic reserves were designed to be replanted indefinitely without degrading. They even had crops the Tang dynasty had never seen: corn, potatoes, and sweet potatoes. I couldn't access those seeds yet, but I could start with scientific breeding for the crops we already had. The library was massive, divided into endless compartments. I didn't have time to look at everything, and frankly, I didn't need high-level physics or chemistry yet. I left the room and walked further down the corridor. A second warehouse door appeared. I pulled it open and froze. It was paper. stacked neatly and packaged by category. The room was filled with it. But this wasn't ordinary writing paper. It was specialized paper for printing currency. I had no idea how much money this could print, but for now, it was useless to me. I checked the other two unlocked rooms. One held specialized currency ink, and the other contained disassembled printing equipment. The corridors stretched further into the darkness, shrouded in mist. It would take time for the rest to unlock. I grabbed what I needed and willed myself out of the space. My vision blurred, and suddenly I was back in my carriage. A few modern books sat in my lap. I couldn't just hand these to the craftsman. The paper was too advanced, and the text was in simplified Chinese they wouldn't understand. I tore out the pages with technical illustrations instead. Ancient craftsmen were geniuses. If I gave them a clear diagram, they could build anything. Carpenters, in particular, were the elite engineers of this age. Back at the Prince of Shu's manor, I summoned the woodworkers. 27 men arrived, 3 generations of masters, journeymen, and apprentices. They all belonged to me, body and soul. Their loyalty was absolute. Can you understand this? I asked, handing the diagrams for the jenny spinner to the 3 headmasters. They took the paper and gasped. They had never felt anything so smooth, so white, or so firm. Then they looked at the drawings. The lines were incredibly thin and precise, and the perspective was unlike anything they'd ever seen. It was a masterpiece of technical drawing. "Your Highness, who drew this?" one master asked, his voice trembling. "The method is genius. This could change everything for our craft." "It's a secret," I replied. "Just know that if you follow these, you'll be the ones to build it. Do your job well, and I might even let you publish books under your own names to be remembered for centuries." In this era, fame and legacy were everything. The 3 masters almost hit the floor to kowtow, stopping only because I had a strict rule against unnecessary kneeling in my house. "We understand, Highness," the lead master said, his eyes shining. "The design is intricate, but we can build it. It looks like a spinning machine." "It is," I said with a smile. "I designed it myself. It increases spinning efficiency by 16 times. The room went silent. 16 times? They knew the current machines. They were basic, one person spinning 1 thread at a time. Most thread was produced by peasants at home and sold to merchants. Large-scale workshops existed, but they were still limited by the 1 thread per person rule. In the Tang dynasty, silk and cloth were used as currency. This wasn't just a machine, it was a literal money printer. I was limited by materials. I couldn't make precision iron gears yet, and wooden ones wouldn't be as smooth. But even a wooden version of the jenny spinner could handle dozens of threads at once. I was about to introduce the concept of the assembly line to the 7th century. The great families and their monopolies didn't stand a chance. The machine I designed was enough to crush any competitor in this era. It wasn't just about the speed, it was about the sheer drop in production costs. 16 times faster meant my fabric would cost a fraction of what everyone else was charging. In the same amount of time it took 16 people to spin 16 threads, I only needed 1 person. Labor costs would plummet to 1/16 of the market rate. When you factored in the savings on workshop space and maintenance, the profit margins were staggering. I turned to Tian Meng, my lead merchant. "How much capital does the Yahello trading firm have right now?" I hadn't taken a single penny from the firm in years. I knew they were stockpiling wealth, waiting for the day I'd finally need it. Tian Meng straightened his back, a hint of pride in his voice. 80,000 guan, Your Highness." 80,000 guan might not sound like a fortune to a king, but Yahello wasn't just a business. It was my private intelligence network. I had always told them that business is like war, and information is the most valuable weapon. We had spies planted in every major trading house in the capital, and their loyalty was bought with the very funds the firm generated. On top of that, we spent heavily on disaster relief and orphanages in my name. To the idiots in Chang'an, I was just a brute like the Duke of Su. They had no idea what I was building in the shadows. "How many Yushannins do we have in the city now?" I asked. "Following your instructions, we have 3 prime locations," Tian Meng replied, bowing. "The best ones are in the East and West markets and the Shanha ward. We also have 7 smaller ones scattered around the outer city." I nodded. The East and West markets were the beating hearts of Chang'an's trade. The city was laid out like a massive, rigid grid. Sometimes I wondered if the original architect had been obsessive-compulsive. It had 14 streets running east to west and 11 running north to south, dividing the city into 108 neat wards. My father's palace sat at the north center, with the imperial offices just below it. The main artery was Juke Avenue, a massive road that split the city in half. Most commoners weren't even allowed on the northern sections, but the Shanha ward sat right in the middle of the action. I only managed to buy that property because I was a prince. Actually, I remembered that deal well. I had to talk sense into Zhang Sun Chong for quite a while before he agreed to sell his family's shop to me. Are these 3 inns set up exactly how I requested? I asked. Yes, Highness. We bought the surrounding shops too. Our inns are now the largest buildings in those districts. Good, I said. Those would be my flagship stores. Withdraw all 80,000 guan. Give 10,000 to Master Lu Daqiang immediately. I want these spinning machines built as fast as possible. Once you're done, I have designs for looms and jacquard machines ready for you. If you need more men, Tianming will find them. Tianming looked like he was about to cry. Highness, it's been 8 years. You're finally using the money. Lu Daqiang, the head craftsman, looked panicked. Your Highness, 10,000 guan is far too much. It's just a spinning machine. We don't need that much. You do, I told him firmly. Because you aren't just making one. I want mass production. I don't care what the Zheng or Zhang Sun families are selling. I know they deal in silk and fabric. We are going to bury them. Lu Daqiang hesitated. If we produce on that scale, we'll need hundreds of master carpenters. Simple apprentices won't have the skill to build these intricate parts. You won't need masters, I said, waving him off. We're going to use an assembly line. An assembly line? Lu Daqiang asked, confused. Standardized parts, I explained. One person focuses on carving one specific gear. Another person only polishes the frame. Then, a final team assembles the pieces. It's like using a mold, but for labor. Lu Daqiang's eyes widened as the realization hit him. It wasn't a new concept. The Qin dynasty had used similar methods to mass-produce crossbows, but in the Tang dynasty, craftsmen were private and secretive. A carpenter usually built a piece of furniture from start to finish because his reputation depended on every single joint. They didn't trust anyone else's work. But working for me was different. Each group of apprentices will follow the exact same measurements, I continued. They'll get faster and better at their one specific task. If a part breaks later, we can just swap it out with a spare because they're all identical. I could see the gears turning in Lu Daqiang's head. He finally understood. We weren't just building machines, we were building a factory. I couldn't wait any longer. It was time to show the great families what real competition looked like. The assembly line was a stroke of genius, and I could see Lu Daqiang's mind racing. He realized the efficiency was one thing, but the secrecy was even better. Even if a craftsman wanted to betray me, they only knew one small part of the puzzle. Collecting the full blueprints would be nearly impossible. I understand, Your Highness, Lu Daqiang said, bowing deeply. I nodded. Good. Tianming, once the prototypes are finished, get the textile department on it immediately. Start stockpiling hemp and silk. Also, send word to our western region branches. I want them to collect as many white butterfly seeds as they can and start large-scale planting. Tianming looked puzzled. White butterfly was just the old name for cotton. It existed in the Tang dynasty, but only in small pockets like Gaochang and Shache. Most people didn't realize its value yet. If we have to, use our profits to buy white butterfly from Gaochang at high prices, I added. And from now on, we call it cotton. Tianming hesitated. Your Highness, Gaochang is far away. Importing cotton will drive our costs through the roof. I know, I said, my voice dropping. I want the price to be high. Make it higher than what the farmers get for growing grain. I want every farmer in Gaochang to stop growing food and start growing cotton. As for their food, we'll buy grain from nearby regions and sell it back to them at cost. Tianming stared at me, confused. I didn't explain. This was a long game, economic warfare. It would take 3 years to see the results, but eventually, I'd have Gaochang exactly where I wanted them. They were always causing trouble for my father, the emperor, and now they were getting in the way of my business. Next, the looms, I said, handing Lu Daqiang the blueprints for the flying shuttle. Once the spinning and weaving tests are successful, expand production. When the spring silk is ready, we take over the fabric market. Yes, Your Highness. One more thing, I continued. Find someone to help me transcribe. I'm going to dictate. Once we're done, I want to start large-scale pig farming. We need to stockpile animal fats and vegetable oils. Tianming looked even more skeptical now. Your Highness, no one really eats pork. Only the poorest of the poor. Most people prefer mutton. I didn't blame him. In this era, pigs weren't raised properly. But I knew better. Pigs were a gold mine. Every part of them was useful. Just do it. Trust me, it's better than mutton. I waved him off. I had blueprints for everything. Cement, soap, refined tea, but I had to pace myself. First, I needed the cash flow. Now, get some people to my study. We have work to do. I was ready to start transcribing my knowledge on animal husbandry when a guard burst in, breathless. Your Highness, an imperial decree from the Empress. She requests your presence in the palace immediately. I froze. Empress Zhongsun? Was she finally stepping in to defend Zhongsun Chong after the beating I gave him? Unlikely. I'd been thumping that kid for years, and she usually stayed out of it. Where is the messenger? I asked. The guard gave a strained laugh. He left, sir. He delivered the message and bolted. He didn't want to stick around for whatever trouble you might stir up. I scoffed. Am I really that scary? Go bring him back. He's on a horse, Your Highness, the guard reminded me. I cursed under my breath. I should have told my guards to detain any messengers. I always suspected my father, Li Shimin, of using the Empress's name to lure me into the palace just so he could give me a face-to-face lecture, or a beating. I dodged his decrees before by pretending I never received them, but I couldn't ignore the Empress. To be honest, I respected her. History called her a virtuous empress, and she lived up to the title. Even with all the grief I gave her family, she was always kind to me. She'd even saved me from my father's temper more than a few times. Still, I wasn't taking any chances. Before heading out, I stuffed some extra padding into my robes to cushion my backside, just in case. I hopped on my horse and rode through the city. Usually, you can't gallop in the streets of Chang'an, but the palace paths are different for royalty. I passed the Taiji Hall and saw a group of maidservants waiting for me. At the front was the Empress's personal attendant. Your Highness, she said, bowing as I approached. The air felt heavy. It was time to find out what kind of trouble I was really in. The Empress is waiting for you, the maid whispered, stealing a quick glance at me. She knew. Everyone knew. I had just given Zhongsun Chong another brutal beating, and this time, I hadn't held back. Where is she? I asked casually. I was testing the waters, trying to see if my father, Li Shimin, was lurking nearby. The Lijing Palace, she replied. I let out a quiet sigh of relief. At this hour, the emperor was usually buried under a mountain of government paperwork. He rarely spent his afternoons in the consort's quarters. I followed the maid through the winding corridors. When we reached the palace doors, the two attendants outside saw me and immediately pulled the heavy gates open. I didn't wait for an introduction. I strode inside, my voice trailing in before my feet even hit the rug. Mother, your son is here. I made sure to sound respectful. Empress Zhongsun wasn't my biological mother, but I always called her mother. It was a habit from my past life that had stuck. Back in the early Tang dynasty, princes usually called their birth mothers Anyang and the Empress Your Highness. When I first dropped the mother bomb, both she and the emperor were stunned, but they never corrected me. Eventually, the other princes and princesses started copying me. I stepped into the room, my head held high, until I saw a familiar figure sitting right there. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't even think. I pulled a sharp U-turn, straightened my back, and shouted toward the ceiling. Mother, I just remembered. I have a special gift for you back at my place. I'll go grab it and be right back. I bolted for the door. To hell with the padding in my robes. I wasn't ready for this. What was Li Shimin doing here today? A sudden burst of laughter echoed through the hall. Empress Zhongsun couldn't help herself. Get your ass back here, Li Shimin roared. Oh, mother, I think I hear father calling me from somewhere else. I better go find him. I yelled back, not even turning around as I reached for the door handle. If you walk out that door today, Li Shimin's voice went cold and sharp. I'm marrying Li Lizzie off tomorrow. I froze. My hand stayed glued to the door. Slowly, I turned around, plastering a fake, surprised smile on my face. Oh, father, you're here? I thought you were somewhere else. That's when I noticed Zhang Sunchong. He was tucked away in a corner, silent, sporting a pair of fresh black eyes that looked like a panda's. He looked pathetic. The Empress was still beaming. She loved this. None of the other royal children dared to act like this around the Emperor. All right, Kurer, come inside, she said, her voice warm. I promise your father won't hit you today. Mother, you should have said so sooner. I relaxed instantly. I walked over and gave the Emperor a casual wave. Hey, Dad, you're here too. I saw the vein in Li Shimin's temple throb. I could practically hear his teeth grinding. Beside him, Zhang Sunchong's mouth twitched. I could see the realization hitting the kid's face. If I was brave enough to talk to the Emperor like this, a mere official's son stood no chance. He probably felt a lot better about his bruises now. Kurer, speak properly, the Empress warned, though she was hiding a smile behind her sleeve. If you keep this up, even I won't be able to hold your father back. She enjoyed these moments. With me, Li Shimin wasn't just a cold, distant emperor. He was a frustrated father. Mother, why did you call for me? I asked, cutting to the chase. Just give me the word, and I'll get it done. It's nothing major, she said gently. Your father and I were discussing Lizzie's marriage. We wanted to hear your thoughts. I blinked. Had the great dictator Li Shimin finally developed a sense of democracy? Usually, he just issued decrees and expected everyone to bow. Well, Mother, I started, putting on my best serious brother face. They say an elder brother is like a father. Even though I'm not the eldest, I care for Lizzie deeply. For a girl like her, her husband must be a hero, a man of unmatched literary talent and peerless martial skill. I started laying it on thick. He needs the tactical mind of Zhuge Liang and the bravery of the greatest generals. At the very least, he should be as skilled as Li Guang and as brilliant as Zhou Yu. Li Shimin's lip curled. I knew what he was thinking. Asterisk, if any court official heard this nonsense, they'd spit in your face. Where are we supposed to find a man like that in the entire Tang Empire? Asterisk. But the Empress was glowing. She didn't care if I was exaggerating. She just loved how much I valued her daughter. Zhang Sunchong, meanwhile, stared at his own feet, likely cursing my name in his head. And look at our Lizzie, I continued, ignoring my father's mounting frustration. She's a masterpiece. Her grace is like the moon, her spirit like the autumn water. She belongs among the 4 great beauties of history, right next to Shi Shi and Diao Chan. Shut up, Li Shimin finally snapped. You pretend to be illiterate, yet you spout these flowery verses? And Diao Chan? That was a title for a Han Dynasty official, not a woman's name. You're talking nonsense. I paused for a second. Is that so? I was the Prince of Shu. I had many flaws, but being wrong wasn't one of them. I doubled down. Maybe in your history books, but in the novel I'm writing, Romance of the 3 Kingdoms, Diao Chan is the most beautiful woman in the world. If I say she exists, she exists. Li Shimin took a deep, shaky breath. Have you no shame? How did I raise a son like you? You? Writing a book? I puffed out my chest. My skin was thicker than the walls of Chang'an. If the real author, Luo Guanzhong, had a problem with me stealing his work a few centuries early, he could come find me. I was pretty sure even he'd have to admit I was doing a great job. Enough, Li Shimin sighed, rubbing his forehead. I didn't bring you here to listen to your bragging. We are talking about the wedding. You previously complained that Lizzie was too young. She is 15 now. By the time the preparations are done next year, she will be 16. That is more than old enough. I am warning you. This is the limit of my patience. He was looking at me hard, clearly expecting me to start a fight. Dad, you call this a discussion? I shot back. You've already made the decision. Why even ask me? Inside, I was already calculating. I knew he was giving me an opening to negotiate. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bothered with this meeting. I had to stop this marriage. But I couldn't use modern logic like genetics or cousins shouldn't marry. That wouldn't fly in the Tang dynasty. I needed a different angle. I thought about using the cousins shouldn't marry argument, but I quickly tossed it aside. In the Tang dynasty, that logic didn't exist. To these people, marriage between cousins was tradition. If I tried to explain DNA or birth defects, they'd look at me like I had 2 heads. Prejudices are like mountains. You can't move them with a few words. Even in the future, with mass media and science, people still doubt the truth. Here, I was just a 17-year-old prince. If I said close relatives shouldn't wed, they'd just ask, "Who do you think you are?" The emperor of the heavens. Even my father, Li Shimin, couldn't change that tradition. The great noble families married within their own circles to keep their power and bloodlines pure. To them, political interest and family survival outweighed everything. If I tried to investigate the downsides of these marriages, I'd be asking for trouble. If a noble family's child died young, and I showed up asking questions, they wouldn't give me data. They'd punch me in the face for rubbing salt in their wounds. In this era, the infant mortality rate was already terrifyingly high. People died from hunger and disease constantly. A few birth defects were just seen as bad luck, or, if they looked strange enough, an omen from the gods. I had to play by their rules. Today, Zhang Sun Chong is right here, Li Shimin said, his brow furrowed. Tell him your requirements. Once Lizzie marries him, you can't just go around beating him up anymore. I looked at the kid and then back at my father. Dad, it's not him I need to talk to. It should be his father. In our world, the parents make the match. What say does he have? Li Shimin's blood pressure looked like it was about to redline. Oh, so now you care about parents' orders? A few years ago, when you were ruining everything, what did you say? Life is precious, but love is worth more? You didn't care about my orders then. He took a breath, trying to steady himself. Just tell him your conditions. If he meets them, you stop the harassment. That's final. I shrugged, looking completely unbothered. Fine. My request is simple. He just has to be able to beat me in a fight. Zhang Sunchong looked like he wanted to curse me out right then and there. I could see the words, "I'd have killed you years ago if I could," written all over his face. Li Shimin's face went dark. If he could beat you, he wouldn't be getting a black eye every month. Be serious. Fine, fine, I said, waving a hand. Let's say, he has to be better than me at martial arts or professional combat. What's the difference? Li Shimin snapped. He was trying to maintain his imperial dignity, but I was pushing him to the edge. Don't look at me like that, Dad, I said with a smirk. A true gentleman should master the 6 arts: rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy, and mathematics. Everyone says I'm just a brute. So, if I require him to be better than me in these 6 areas, that's fair, right? The room went silent. Li Shimin, Empress Zhangsun, and Zhang Sunchong all shared the same weird expression. The 6 arts were the gold standard for scholars, but very few people actually mastered all of them. Then it hit Li Shimin. He realized that while I acted like a hooligan, I actually had the skills to back it up. Zhang Sunchong might be okay at calligraphy or music, but there was no way he could beat me in archery or charioteering. In mathematics, I was from the 21st century. In this world, I was a math god. What's the matter? Can't do it, I asked, cutting a side eye toward Zhang Sunchong. My voice was pure mockery. Li Shimin was stuck. He couldn't call my request unreasonable because these were the rules of Confucius himself. If he argued against the 6 arts, he was arguing against the foundation of their entire culture. Zhang Sunchong took a deep breath. He knew if he stayed silent, the wedding was over. He didn't actually want to marry a princess. It usually meant his political career would hit a glass ceiling. But as the eldest son of the Zhangsun family, he had no choice. It was about the alliance. He stepped forward and bowed deeply to me. Your Highness, I am not as talented as you. You are a dragon among men. I ask that you give me a different task, a chance to prove I am worthy of the princess. You're probably cursing my ancestors in your head right now, I said dryly. Don't act all polite with me. I don't like you, and you don't have to like me. You can even insult me if you want. Just keep it to yourself. I wouldn't dare, he replied, his head still bowed. Please, give me a chance. My parents stayed quiet. They knew that if they wanted this marriage to happen, they had to get me to agree. I was a headache, but I was a prince of the Tang, and my disapproval carried weight. I looked at Zhang Sunchong, still bowing there. He had that old fox energy his father was famous for. He knew how to endure. I knew I couldn't just keep causing scenes forever. If the emperor was dead set on this, eventually he'd just force it through. I needed a deal that everyone would sign off on. Fine, I said, my voice turning serious. Since the emperor and empress are both here, I won't make it impossible for you. Li Shimin and the Empress both perked up. They knew that when I used my formal titles, I was actually being serious for once. Please speak, Your Highness, Zhang Sunchong said. Maybe my previous demands were too high. I continued. But there's one thing that isn't up for debate. If my sister marries you, her lifestyle, what she eats, what she wears, the house she lives in, cannot drop in quality. I won't let her suffer. So, I have one condition. If you can't do it, you have to break off the engagement with my sister yourself. Do you dare to agree? I stared at Zhang Sunchong, a cold smile playing on my lips. My father, Li Shimin, hesitated. I could see the suspicion in his eyes. He knew me well enough to know I was likely digging a hole for someone. But until I actually stated my conditions, he couldn't exactly stop me. Zhang Sunchong looked conflicted. I can't decide something this important on my own, he stammered. He was right. A marriage alliance between the imperial family and the Zhangsun clan wasn't something a kid like him could gamble with. I turned toward the emperor and empress, giving them a formal bow before I continued. Father, mother, the conditions I'm about to set are not unreasonable. If Zhang Sunchong, or rather, the Zhangsun family, cannot meet them, then the engagement must be cancelled. I'm not asking him to agree right this second. He can go back and discuss it with his father, the Duke of Qi. Li Shimin stroked his beard, still wary. Tell us your conditions first. It's simple, I said. I've been alive for quite a few years now, father. Aside from my monthly allowance, you haven't exactly showered me with rewards. In fact, you find me so many times I've lost count. I held up one finger, my voice steady. I will give the Zhangsun family 1 year. 1 year from today, the betrothal gifts they bring for my sister cannot be worth less than the dowry I personally provide for her. If their gifts are worth even a copper coin less than what I give her, the wedding is off. I paused to let that sink in. And remember, this is the dowry I provide. It has nothing to do with the emperor's treasury or what the palace sends. This is from me, Li Ko. I meant every word. The room went quiet. On the surface, this condition sounded like a joke. Even though I was a prince, everyone knew I was broke by royal standards. Aside from the initial gifts I received when I was first titled, Li Shimin hadn't given me much because I was always causing trouble. Between my high living expenses and the cost of maintaining my personal staff, my allowance barely covered the basics. How much of a dowry could a troublemaker, prince like me actually scrap together? The Zhangsun family, on the other hand, was swimming in wealth. They had years of imperial rewards, deep connections with other powerful clans, and they controlled several high-profit industries in the Tang dynasty, businesses that common merchants weren't even allowed to touch. Zhang Sunchong looked stunned. He had spent the whole day braced for some impossible, sadistic challenge, and then I threw him. This? He almost blurted out, I agree, right then and there. I didn't give him the chance to feel relieved. I leaned in, my voice dripping with sarcasm. So, Zhang Sunchong, are you a man or not? Surely a man wouldn't let his future wife live a life inferior to what her brother can provide. You wouldn't let her suffer, would you? Surely not. Li Shimin rolled his eyes. He knew my serious act was over and the brat was back. Father, mother, do you agree to this? I asked, ignoring Zhang Sunchong. I needed the emperor to buy in. If he didn't give the word, none of this mattered. Li Shimin's face darkened. Marriage is a serious matter, not a game for you to play. Father, this is my only condition. I shot back, my voice rising. If they can't even match what I provide, how can my sister be happy there? I won't watch her live a life of hardship. If you don't agree to this, I can't guarantee what I'll do next. I started acting out, leaning into my reputation as a loose cannon. Zhang Sunchong looked like his head was going to explode. Hardship? We were talking about the eldest daughter of the emperor and the son of the most powerful official in the land. Where was the hardship supposed to come from? Cour, I know you want what's best for Lizzie. Empress Zhangsun said softly. She knew me. She knew that if I wanted to ruin a wedding, I'd find a way, and no amount of floggings or house arrests would stop me. How about this? Let Zhang Sunchong go back and consult with the Duke. But I have one requirement. If the Zhangsun family meets your condition, you must stop interfering. Can you promise that? If they can't do it, they voluntarily break the engagement, I said firmly. If they do, I give you my word. I won't interfere. Fine, Li Shimin sighed, taking a deep breath. Remember what you said today. Zhang Sun Chong, go home. Tell your father everything Li Ku said. Surely the Zhang Sun family can provide a gift better than whatever Li Ku scrapes together. If your father has no objections, I agree to these terms. Yes, your majesty. I'll go speak with him immediately, Zhang Sun Chong said, bowing low. Wait, Li Shimin called out, looking at me. One more thing. During this 1 year, you are not allowed to cause trouble for Zhang Sun Chong. If you harass him, this deal is void. I nodded easily. As long as the Duke agrees to the terms and Zhang Sun Chong doesn't provoke me, I won't touch him. After all, if he meets my conditions, he'll be my brother-in-law. I have to think about my sister's future. Thank you, Your Highness, Zhang Sun Chong said, looking relieved. I'll take my leave now. Once he was gone, I bowed to my parents. Then I'll be going too. I need to get to work. I have a lot of money to make if I'm going to provide a proper dowry for my sister. Just get out of here, Li Shimin groaned, waving me away. And stay out of trouble. I bowed one last time and walked out of the hall. As I left, I could feel my father's eyes on my back. He knew I was up to something. He felt the trap closing, but he couldn't see the teeth. He thought he knew my limits. He had no idea that a soul from the modern world doesn't play by the rules of the Tang dynasty. I wasn't just going to give my sister a dowry. I was going to build an empire that would make the Zhang Sun family's wealth look like pocket change. I stepped out into the crisp air, a satisfied grin on my face. The game had finally begun. I hadn't walked far when I spotted a tiny figure waiting by the roadside. As soon as she saw me, she sprinted over as fast as her little legs could carry her. Third brother. It was Jin Yang, my 3-year-old sister. We all called her Tsitsi. I had watched her grow up from a literal infant, and my heart melted every time she spoke in that high-pitched, milk-sweet voice. She was barely 2 years old by modern standards and still struggled to get her words out clearly. Tsitsi, what are you doing out here? I asked, a wide grin breaking across my face. I was waiting for you, she panted, grabbing my hand. Big sister was crying. I came to find you. I stiffened. Which big sister? Third brother. Another voice called out. I looked up and saw a girl about 5 or 6 years old approaching us. It was Princess Qingyang. If she was here, then the one crying had to be Changle. I beckoned Qingyang over, and she ran to join us while their maids kept a respectful distance. Tell me, I said softly, looking at them both. Did Changle hear what I was discussing with father and mother? Qingyang nodded vigorously. When that bad man came, mother told us to leave. But big sister was sad afterward. Then, when you arrived, we were hiding nearby. We heard everything. I sighed and picked Qingyang up, taking Qingyang's hand in mine. Come on, let's go find her. We walked toward the small garden behind Lijing Hall. It didn't take long to find Changle. She was sitting alone, quietly wiping tears from her cheeks. All right, let me see who this little crybaby is, I teased, stepping into her view with a playful smile. Usually, Changle would dodge my teasing, but not today. She turned her head, her eyes red and swimming with tears. The moment our eyes met, she completely lost it. The dam broke. Before I could even react, she lunged forward and buried her face in my chest, sobbing uncontrollably. I froze for a second. Changle was a young woman now. In the Tang dynasty, girls her age were already thinking about the boundaries between men and women. Even as siblings, we hadn't hugged like this since she was 10. The maids behind her stood with their mouths hanging open in shock. Third brother, do I really have to marry Zhang Sun Chong? She muffled into my robes. I don't want to. I really don't want to. A pang of guilt hit me. I realized I was partly to blame for her terror. Over the years, I had gone out of my way to tell her every single bad thing Zhang Sun Chong had ever done. In her mind, he wasn't a suitor, he was a monster. She dreamed of a hero, a man of character, not a snake like him. Don't worry, I whispered, patting her back. You won't have to marry him. I promise. She pulled back slightly, looking up at me with watery eyes. Really? Really? I said, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. You heard the deal. As long as they agree to my terms, I won't lose. A year from now, I'm going to give you a dowry that will make the entire world jealous. Changle bit her lip, her face clouding with worry again. But they are the Zhang Sun family. They are so rich. And you don't have any money, third brother. What if I give you all the savings I've tucked away? I laughed. It was genuinely touching. She really thought I was a broke prince playing a losing game. I reached out and ruffled her hair, messing up her perfect style. Who told you I don't have money? Before now, I was just pretending. She looked skeptical. Then why did sixth brother say you were poor? He even tried to borrow money from me because he said you wouldn't give him any. My eyebrows shot up. Li'en was trying to shake down his little sister? That brat. He did he? I muttered. Listen to me, Changle. I have plenty of money. Don't you dare lend him a single copper. I'm ignoring him on purpose to teach him a lesson. Next time he asks, tell him you gave all your money to me. Changle nodded obediently, finally calming down. I promised her that in a few days, I'd show her the first step of my plan, the business that would fund her freedom. She was curious, but she didn't push. She was always the gentle, trusting soul of the family. Just be a happy princess, I told her firmly. Leave the rest to me. After a few more words with Jinyang and Chengyang, I turned to leave. As I walked away, my mind drifted to the history I knew from my old life. In that timeline, both Changle and Jinyang died tragically young. I suspected Changle's early death was linked to childbearing. Giving birth at such a young age was a death sentence in this era. Even their mother, Empress Zhongsun, passed away at 36 after having 7 children. But there was more to it. The Li family had a history of genetic issues, something like hypertension or cardiovascular disease. Then there was my older brother, the Crown Prince Li Changqian. History claimed he became a cripple after falling off a horse, which led to his downward spiral. But I had been quietly observing his symptoms. A simple leg injury from a fall doesn't usually lead to a permanent, worsening disability like his. The way he described the pain and the way his foot seemed to be failing, it looked like diabetic foot. If he really had late-stage diabetes, his future was grim. In this world, there was no insulin. There was only a slow, agonizing decline. It explained why he eventually became so desperate and volatile. I looked back at my sisters playing in the garden. I wasn't just here to change my own fate anymore. I had to change theirs, too. The Tang dynasty was a golden age, but it was built on a foundation of fragile lives. I intended to reinforce that foundation with everything I brought from the future. I knew what was killing my brother, even if the doctors didn't. In this era, they called it wasting thirst, but I knew it as diabetes. I hadn't asked the royal physicians about it. I wasn't a doctor, and showing too much medical knowledge would only spark suspicion. I preferred to stay out of that mess. My younger sister Jinyang, however, was a different story. She seemed to have inherited our mother's fragile health. Empress Zhongsun suffered from chronic shortness of breath, likely congenital asthma. It wasn't necessarily fatal, but the ancient treatments were doing more harm than good. When Jinyang fell ill recently, the imperial doctors had sealed every window in her room to keep out the cold wind. For an asthmatic, a room without ventilation is a coffin. I couldn't rewrite the laws of medicine overnight, but I could force a change in her lifestyle. I pushed for fresh air and light exercise, though I wasn't sure how much difference a layman like me could truly make. Once I left the palace, I headed straight back to my estate and summoned Tianming. I had a new project. I sat down and sketched out the process for making glass. It was actually quite simple. The chemistry was basic, even if the furnace requirements were high. With the technology already available in the Tang dynasty, we could definitely pull it off. I needed a new source of wealth, and clear glass would be a literal gold mine. Back in the Lijing Palace, Empress Zhongsun was resting on her couch. My father, Emperor Li Shimin, sat beside her as 2 maidservants reported my earlier conversation with the princesses. That was it, my father asked. That's all the Prince of Shu said. Yes, Your Majesty, the maid replied respectfully. My father raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. That boy, he really does care for his sisters, but I still feel like he's up to something. My mother smiled softly. Since you've already agreed to his terms, don't overthink it. Regardless, Kuer is right. The Zhongsun family shouldn't be outdone by a prince's dowry. They can't give more than the emperor, but they shouldn't give less than a brother. Even though the Zhongsun family was her own blood, my mother had been tied to my father since she was 13. She was an empress first and a Zhongsun second. She wouldn't protect her maiden family if they were in the wrong. I know, my father sighed. I just hope that kid doesn't cause any more trouble. By the way, how is Jinyang feeling? Much better, my mother said, her eyes brightening. Kura was right about a few things. Since he insisted on ventilating her room, encouraging her to move, and keeping her away from heavy pollen, her health has improved significantly. She's even gained some weight. Is that his skill? My father grumbled. That's probably just Sun Simiao's medical advice that he's parroting. My mother just smiled. I had claimed my advice came from the legendary physician Sun Simiao, but she was clever. She knew that if you actually looked for the sources of the things I said, you wouldn't find them anywhere. She realized I had great talent. I just chose to hide it behind excuses. Meanwhile, Zhang Sun Chong had scrambled home as fast as his legs could carry him. His father, Zhang Sun Wuji, was waiting in the study. He hit you again? Wuji asked, staring at his son's bruised face. His voice was cold. To the world, Wuji always wore a smile when dealing with me, but inside, he was seething. I treated his son like a common servant, and every blow to Chong was a slap to Wuji's own face. He was just waiting for the right moment to strike back. A single, lethal move. It's fine. I'm used to it, Zhang Sun Chong spat, a dark look in his eyes. He only has a few years left to act tough. Once the crown prince ascends the throne, I'll make him pay. Watch your tongue, Wuji warned. He looked at his son, disappointed. What do you think of his demands for the dowry? I'll leave that to you, father, Chong replied. Wuji slammed his hand on the desk. This is why he mocks you. You have no backbone. I will decide. Yes, but you must have your own thoughts. Then I think we should agree, Chong said quickly. We have to, Wuji muttered. If we back down now, our family loses all face. Besides, I know his secret. His wealth comes from the Yahello trading firm. I've had your mother's family investigate them. They buy low and sell high, but they don't own the production sources. If I cut off their supply chains, his little empire collapses in a day. Wuji leaned back, a cruel smile forming. At the next court assembly, I will impeach him. But tomorrow, I will publicly agree to his terms. Stay away from him for the next year. Don't give him any more excuses to touch you. After his son left, Wuji sat in the silence of his study, plotting. He had to destroy my reputation in the emperor's eyes. His motivation was simple. He knew the crown prince, Li Chengxian, was dying. The wasting thirst was getting worse. Wuji had checked the records. People with this disease didn't live long. Even if the emperor lived another 20 years, the crown prince wouldn't survive to see the crown. To make matters worse, the prince's leg was failing him. My father had already privately mentioned the idea of making me the heir instead. Wuji couldn't allow that. He needed a bridge to the throne, and that bridge had to be a child of Empress Zhang's son. If the eldest son failed, he would push for the younger brother, Li Tai. Anyone but me. As long as a Jiangsuan-blooded prince took the throne, Wuji remained the most powerful man in the empire. And he wasn't about to let a troublemaker like me ruin his legacy. My father had once privately mentioned making me the crown prince. He did it without anyone prompting him, which meant I held a significant place in his heart. Zhang Sun Wuji knew this. He had talked the emperor out of it for now, but he knew that wasn't a permanent fix. To him, I was a threat that had to be handled. He couldn't kill me. I was a prince, after all, so his best move was to stain my reputation. He wanted to make sure the other officials would never accept me as a leader. That was why he'd let me bully his son for years without making a scene. He was playing the long game. Being the top official of the Lingyan Pavilion and the Duke of Qi wasn't a job for the impulsive. I didn't know the full extent of his plotting back then. My father didn't share his private thoughts with me, and being a transmigrator didn't make me all-knowing. After I set my own plans in motion, I just waited for the results. In the 8 years since I arrived in the Tang dynasty, I hadn't been idle. I had built a rock-solid foundation. I had the money, the people, and the channels to get anything done. I spent the evening reading a book on political theory I'd found in my secret warehouse. I hadn't read this specific one in my past life, but I figured it was time to catch up. Politics in the West was always taught differently than back home, and I wanted a fresh perspective. The next morning, I woke up early. I went through my personal workout routine, a mix of modern fitness and Tang military combat techniques. Once I finished, I hurried to the palace. It was the day of the Grand Assembly. In the Tang dynasty, these happened every 5 days, unlike the daily grind of later dynasties. Even though I didn't have an active post yet, my title required me to attend. My intelligence from the ULI trading firm warned me that the old fox, Zhang Sun Wuji, was planning to impeach me. Again, I wondered what excuse he'd find this time. Over the years, he'd attacked me for every trivial thing imaginable. In the royal family, even a small mistake can be twisted into a threat to national security if an official talks long enough. It was exhausting. I'd beaten his son a few times, sure, but did he really have to make it a state affair? The assembly started like any other. We greeted my father, and he signaled for us to take our seats. I noticed the chairs I'd invented were being used all over the hall. The old ministers with bad knees couldn't handle the traditional kneeling style anymore, and the Tang court was far more open-minded than the rigid dynasties that would follow. If anyone has a matter to discuss, speak now, my father announced. Zhang Sun Wuji stood up immediately. Your Majesty, I wish to impeach the Prince of Shu, Li Ku. The other ministers didn't even blink. They were used to this. For years, Zhang Sun Wuji had been picking fights with me over minor details of my personal conduct. It had gotten so bad that people wondered if he was trying to out-lecture Wei Zhang, the official imperial critic. But Wei Zhang's job was to keep the emperor in check. Wuji? He was just being a nuisance. My father looked weary. What is it this time? I impeached the Prince of Shu for wasting his life on trifles, Wuji said, his voice booming. He lacks ambition and fails the virtues of the imperial family. He brawls within the palace walls. Instead of sharing your Majesty's burdens, he spends his days gambling, cockfighting, and frequenting brothels. He is a disgrace to the royal name. I request that he be confined to his manor for a year to reflect on his actions. Across the hall, General Cheng Yaojin rolled his eyes and leaned his head on his hand, looking like he was about to take a nap. He was bored. I was too. I rolled my eyes so hard it hurt. Asterisk, seriously? This again? Asterisk. My informants told me he had something planned, and I expected something new. But no, he was using the same tired script he'd used for years. I have something to say, I said, standing up. My father waved a hand dismissively. Go ahead. He knew there was no stopping us once we started. I looked straight at Wuji. Duke of Qi, are you finished? Can't you come up with something new? You've used the same excuse for years. Aren't you tired of it? The military officers in the room snapped their eyes open. Usually, when Wuji attacked me, I try to talk my way out of it or twist the logic to avoid being grounded. This was different. I was attacking him head-on. Cheng Yaojin actually sat up straight, looking interested. Your Highness, how dare you talk back? Wuji countered smoothly. The fact that I have had to impeach you for the same issues for years only proves you haven't changed. It proves you need to be confined. He was good. He'd caught my slip of the tongue and turned it against me instantly. The generals shook their heads, thinking I'd walked right into the old man's trap. But I wasn't done. Why shouldn't I talk back? I barked. Everything you say is nonsense. I've put up with you for years. But today, I'm done. Let me ask you, if I were the crown prince, then sure, I'd be wasting my life. But I'm not. If I were ambitious and hardworking, do you think any crown prince in history would feel safe? The room went deathly silent. My brother, the crown prince, was sitting right there. My eldest brother is here, so I'll say it plainly. I continued, my voice echoing. I've studied the art of war. The Duke of Wei, Li Jing, is here. Ask him if I know my way around a strategy. If I decided to be ambitious and took command of the Tang armies, do you think my brother would be able to sleep at night? Several ministers choked on their breath. Li Jing, the greatest general of the era, stared at me with wide, shocked eyes. I had just said the one thing no one was ever supposed to say out loud. Cheng Yaojin and the other generals looked at me like I was a madman. I could see the respect in their eyes, mixed with pure terror. They were probably thinking that the Prince of Shu was the balliest man in the Tang dynasty. Even Zhang Sun Wuji stood there, his mouth slightly open, completely stunned. I had just broken the ultimate taboo of the imperial court. Up on the throne, my father's face went from red to a deep, bruised purple. He wasn't mad at what I said. He was mad that I had the audacity to say it in front of everyone. Some things are meant for private arguments, not for the ears of every official in the capital. Zhang Sun Wuji was caught completely off guard. He didn't know how to respond. Everyone in that room knew the history. My father, Li Shimin, had taken the throne by force because he was a brilliant general who had too much influence in the army. By saying I was staying lazy to keep my brother safe, I was pointing a finger at the giant elephant in the room. Wuji finally found his voice, though he sounded desperate. He tried to claim I was insulting the crown prince's character, suggesting my brother wasn't generous enough to tolerate a talented sibling. It was a weak move. I didn't let him breathe. I told him to leave my brother out of it. I looked my father dead in the eye and told the entire room that even if he offered me the throne right this second, I wouldn't take it. I didn't want the stress. I didn't want the crown. The ministers were breaking out in cold sweats. They thought I was suicidal. My eldest brother, Li Chengxian, was sweating the most. At first, he looked annoyed that I'd brought him into the crossfire. But once I said I had zero interest in his job, he visibly relaxed. He looked at me like, "Keep going, little brother. I'm staying out of this one." Zhangsun Wuji was stuck. He couldn't jump into a family argument between a father and his sons. It was a minefield. Before he could pivot, my father finally snapped. He roared my name, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. I knew if I didn't stop now, he might actually have me dragged out. I put on my best innocent face. I told him to calm down and claimed I just had a loose tongue. I played the part of the humble brother, insisting that only my eldest brother was fit to be emperor. I told them all I just wanted to be a carefree prince who enjoyed his life. The officials looked relieved, but I wasn't done with Wuji yet. I turned to him and dropped the real bomb. I told the whole court exactly why he was targeting me. It was because of the condition I'd set for his son to marry my sister, Changle. I didn't give anyone a chance to interrupt. I announced the bet right there in front of the Duke of Wei and every other powerful man in the room. I told them that the Zhangsun family had to match my personal dowry for my sister. Not the emperor's official dowry, my own. If their betrothal gifts were worth even a cent less than what I provided, the engagement was off. Cheng Yaojin loved it. He started laughing and taunted Wuji, asking if the great Zhangsun family was too broke to match a single prince's savings. Yu Qigong joined in, mocking Wuji's pride. Wuji's face turned black. He was the most powerful official in the land. If he backed down now, he'd be the laughingstock of the dynasty. He snapped back, agreeing to the terms. He swore that if his gifts didn't measure up, he would have no face to ask for the princess's hand. I clapped my hands, sealing the deal before my father could intervene. I saw my father's expression stiffen. He wanted to play the diplomat and smooth things over, but I'd moved too fast. If he disagreed now, it would look like he didn't think his own daughter was worth the price. I bowed deeply, acting like the most dutiful son in the world. I told them I would step back so they could get back to important state business. I walked back to my seat and sat down, feeling Wuji's murderous glare on my back. I didn't care. I had just bought my sister another year of freedom, and I had a year to make sure I became the richest man in the Tang dynasty. It was only then that my father realized what I'd done. I had talked circles around everyone, mixing jokes with threats until the original issue, my misbehavior, was completely buried. The serious impeachment Zhangsun Wuji had planned had just dissolved into a petty argument about dowries. Wuji sat back down in his seat, his heart likely pounding with disbelief. Even if he was seething, he had no choice. Other ministers were already stepping forward to report on state affairs, and the rhythm of the court moved on. From across the room, I felt his eyes on me. He looked puzzled. He was probably wondering if I had manipulated the conversation on purpose or if I was just a lucky idiot. If I had planned that verbal trap, it meant I wasn't the mindless brute I pretended to be. But he quickly shook the thought away. For years, I had played the fool so well that the image was burned into everyone's mind. If Wuji told anyone he was afraid of my hidden intellect, they'd laugh until their teeth fell out. They'd think he'd finally cracked under the pressure of my constant harassment. In reality, Wuji had usually held the upper hand over the years. He was the master of court politics, and I had been punished by my father more times than I could count because of his schemes. If I hadn't been so busy making his son's life a living hell, I might have actually been annoyed. He looked at me and probably cursed the heavens. My father was brilliant and divine, yet he had a son who acted like a carbon copy of that loudmouthed thug, Cheng Yaojin. It was a waste of a face that looked almost exactly like the emperor's. The other ministers were wiping cold sweat from their brows, glancing nervously at my father. When they saw he had shifted his focus to actual government business, they finally exhaled. They all thought the same thing. The Prince of Shu had some serious nerve today. He said things no one else would dare to whisper. Luckily, the Emperor knew my temperament and let it slide. As I sat there, I scanned the room. Wuji and the powerful aristocratic clans were a massive problem. If I didn't have my secret trading company, the Yahello merchant group, already spreading across the country, I wouldn't stand a chance. These elite families, the 5 great clans and 7 lineages, controlled everything. They were the backbone of the bureaucracy. Even Wuji's wife came from the Zheng family of Xinjiang. The only reason they didn't hold every top-tier position yet was because the Tang dynasty was still young. But the mid-level officials, the ones who actually made the gears turn, they were all theirs. In this world, political power was business power. If I weren't a prince, I'd be crushed in a week. But the Yahello merchant group was my foundation. In business, a good product beats a good connection every time. I looked at Wuji and sneered internally. Right now, he probably had more liquid cash than I did. My younger brother, Li Yin, was a total money pit. In history, he was a complete brat. In this life, I kept him on a short leash, but he still loved to spend. My mother, Consort Yang, constantly gave him allowances, and I had to top him off just to keep him out of trouble. I got beaten by my father. Li Yin got beaten by me. The problem was, he never learned. When the assembly finally ended, I didn't linger. I gave a quick wave and bolted. I knew my father. Once the adrenaline of the meeting wore off, he'd remember how rude I was and reach for the wooden planks. If I didn't run now, I'd be nursing a bruised backside for a month. The ministers watched me run and shook their heads. They'd seen this show 1,000 times. They couldn't understand how a graceful woman like my mother and a decisive man like my father produced a son who acted like Cheng Yaojin's long-lost child. I planned to hide out at my private estate outside the city for a few days. I had land and farmers there, but I needed a real cash cow. It was time to start the glass project. I had the blueprints in my head. The technology was simple, but the results would look like a miracle to people in this era. Clear glass was worth its weight in gold, and silver-backed mirrors? Those were luxury items that would drain the pockets of every noble in Chang'an. I couldn't wait to see the look on Wuji's face when I started out earning him. But I didn't leave the palace grounds just yet. I waited at Qingtian Gate. To get out of the palace, the officials had to pass through 3 sets of walls. Most of the important offices were located in the imperial city right outside the gate. Since the Department of State Affairs was on the left, I knew exactly where Wuji would exit. I stood by Changle Gate, leaning against the wall. When the officials started trickling out, they froze the moment they saw me. Their first thought was obvious. Is the Prince of Shu going to start a fistfight with the Duke of Qi right here in the street? Even old man Cheng Yaojin stopped in his tracks. He took one look at me, grinned, and stepped aside to make sure Wuji had a clear path toward me. Wuji saw me, and his heart skipped a beat. He wasn't scared of me politically, but he was definitely scared of getting punched in the face in front of his colleagues. I didn't even look at Wuji. Instead, I waved at the man walking behind him. Hey, big brother. I've been waiting for you. I was waiting for the crown prince, Li Chengqian. I didn't actually have anything to say to him. I just wanted to stand there and make Wuji as uncomfortable as possible. Third brother, Li Chengqian asked, looking confused. Do you need something? Li Chengqian paused. My relationship with him wasn't actually that bad. In fact, he got along with almost all the princes, except for Li Tai. Big brother. I called out loudly. I have to tell you, a new top-tier courtesan just arrived at Huiyue House. Her singing is incredible. My treat today. I'll take you there to appreciate the art. Zhangsun Wuji's face turned pitch black instantly. He had just spent the entire morning session impeaching me for being a useless playboy who spent all his time in brothels. Now, I was inviting the crown prince to one right in front of his face. To make it worse, Wuji was the crown prince's uncle. Old man Cheng Yaojin and the other generals nearby nearly died laughing. I had to hand it to myself. I never let a grudge last overnight. If I hadn't been afraid of the emperor, I would have invited Chengqian right outside the Taiji Palace. Waiting until we reached Changle Gate was me showing Wuji a huge amount of respect. Your Highness, stop ruining the reputation of brothels, Cheng Yaojin said, winking as he tried to smooth things over. He knew I wasn't actually trying to drag Chengqian there. Besides, A crown prince couldn't just wander into a place like that, even if it was just for the music. Huh. The military officials burst into laughter. They all knew my secret. For years, every time I went to a brothel, I actually just listened to the music. The beautiful women there were dying for my attention, but I never touched a single one. To these rough old soldiers, that was the funniest thing in the world. Get lost, all of you. I rolled my eyes. What do you know? Aside from chasing women, do you have any actual hobbies? Your Highness, you're still young, one general laughed. You don't know the real benefits yet. The civil officials frowned and walked around us, trying to distance themselves from the noise. Wuji let out a cold snort and stormed off. Third brother, Chengqian said with a helpless smile. Go have fun on your own. I have duties to attend to. Fine, fine. I'll visit your place another day then, I said with a grin. I bowed to him, and he nodded before limping away. My father allowed him to use a carriage because of his leg injury, but Chengqian always refused. He insisted on walking. Watching his back, I felt a pang of pity. In these years since I'd reincarnated, Chengqian had been a great older brother and an excellent crown prince. He was hardworking and kind to his siblings. In history, he only went off the rails because his leg injury got worse and my father started looking for a replacement. Imagine working your heart out from age 8, studying day and night to be the best, only to be told right before the finish line that none of it mattered. It would drive anyone insane. Once Chengqian was gone, I turned to Chung Yaojin and the others. Duke of Lu, gentlemen, I'm off. I'll treat you all to the strongest liquor you've ever tasted soon. We'll hold you to that, Prince of Shu. Chung Yaojin waved me off with a smile. I headed straight for my estate outside the city. Meanwhile, back in the palace, my father was questioning his head eunuch, Chong Lin. Well, my father asked. Reporting to your majesty, the Prince of Shu left early, Chong Lin replied. He almost said ran away. My father let out a cold huff. He's never this quick when I actually need him. He's clever, isn't he? He used a few jokes to deflect Wuji's complaints and forced my hand on the marriage deal at the same time. Chong Lin stayed silent. If anyone else had played the emperor like that, their head would be on a spike. Forget it, my father sighed. I already gave my word. Besides, now that the deal is set, maybe he'll stop beating up Wuji's son. That boy is nothing but trouble. He paused, noticing Chong Lin's hesitant expression. Speak up. What is it? Your Majesty, what if the dowry the prince provides is actually worth more than the duke's betrothal gifts? My father stared at him. The Zhangsun family had been with him since the beginning. They were incredibly wealthy with massive business interests. I had my Yuepai trading house, but everyone knew I barely took a cent from it. It was basically a charity. Where would I get the money? We'll see, my father muttered, feeling a headache coming on. It's too late to change it anyway. If Wuji loses to a kid, he'll just have to deal with the embarrassment. I want to see how the boy plans to make that much gold in a single year. I spent the next day at my estate, waiting for Lu Daqiang and the others to finish my secret projects. According to the progress reports, it wouldn't be long. Sure enough, the next afternoon, Tianming came rushing in, breathless with excitement. Your Highness, the ginning machine and the new loom, they're both finished. They work. I stood up, a smirk playing on my lips. Perfect. Let's see if Wuji still thinks he's the richest man in Chang'an. It's time to show them what a technological crush looks like. When I arrived at the workshop, the machinery was already lined up and ready. They had prepared the silk and the yarn for a test run. A spinner and a weaver stood by their stations, waiting for my command. As I walked in, I saw the fire in their eyes. They had already tested the machines before calling me, and they looked at the equipment like it was a gift from the gods. To them, this wasn't just wood and iron, it was magic. Show me, I said, waving a hand toward the spinning machine. Tianming signaled the worker. The man grabbed the large flywheel and gave it a powerful turn. That single motion set 16 smaller flywheels into a frantic spin. The raw silk was pulled in, twisted, and transformed into yarn right before my eyes. It wasn't just fast, it was 16 times faster than a traditional wheel. And this was just the beginning. Once I hooked these up to a steam engine, we wouldn't be spinning 16 threads at once. We'd be spinning 160. In the Tang Dynasty, silk wasn't just fabric. It was currency. Because the coinage from the previous Sui dynasty was trash and the new Kaiyuan coins were in short supply, people used bolts of silk to trade for everything. Producing silk was literally like printing money. Usually, the profit margins were tight, 30% for raw materials, 40% for labor, and only 30% profit. That was why the great noble families were so rich. They owned the mints. They could turn 70 cents of effort into $1 of value every single day. I turned my gaze to the new loom. The shuttle flew back and forth with a mechanical rhythm that made the old manual methods look like they were moving in slow motion. "Your Highness," Tianming said, his voice trembling with excitement. "I've done the math. The weaving efficiency has increased 8-fold. But here is the real kicker. Our total cost from buying raw silk to finishing a bolt of fabric is only 1/20th of our competitors." I raised an eyebrow. "Give me the numbers." "Most people spend about 210 won to produce one bolt of silk," he explained. "The market price is 300 won. Our cost, including logistics, it's only 96 won. But if we optimize, we could get it down to 6 won for the labor and processing." I looked at Lu Daqiang, the head craftsman. "How fast can you build more?" "If we use the assembly line method you taught us, and I have 300 men," Lu Daqiang replied confidently, "we can churn out one spinning machine and one loom every 2 days." Tianming and the others bowed deeply. They weren't just bowing to a prince anymore. They were bowing to a man who was about to flip the entire economy of the Tang dynasty on its head. I started doing the mental math. The national tax revenue was roughly 2 million strings of cash, but a huge chunk of that, about 58%, was paid in silk and grain. By controlling the production of silk, I wasn't just getting rich. I was seizing the pulse of the empire's finances. "I have an idea," I told Tianming. "The current tax system, the Xiangxiu, relies on every household providing silk or grain. The big noble families, the 5 great clans, and the 7 names, they control the officials and the land. But they don't control technology." I looked at the book in my hand, a strange smirk on my face. In my old world, people called certain strategies dragon-slaying techniques. I wasn't looking to kill the emperor, that was my father, but I was definitely going to skin the noble families alive. "We aren't going to just sell silk," I explained. "We're going to form a trading guild. We'll buy raw silk directly from the small families and the peasants at a higher price than the nobles offer, and then we'll process it at a fraction of the cost." Tianming blinked, realization dawning on him. "But will they really choose us over the powerful clans?" I laughed. "In this world, money doesn't just talk. It screams. When we offer them a better life and the nobles offer them debt, who do you think they'll pick?" The Zhangsun family thought they were the richest in Chang'an. They thought they could use their wealth to buy my sister's future. They had no idea that I was about to make their entire fortune as obsolete as a stone hammer. The cost-saving potential was staggering. By skipping the middlemen and buying raw silk directly from the peasants, I could make far more profit than the nobles ever did by producing it themselves. Any sane person would jump at the chance. "Tianming," I asked, my voice deliberate, "what do you think will happen to my influence once I pull all the small noble families and local clans to our side?" I gave him a thin smile. These small families were the ones who actually interacted with the people. They were the ones who collected the wealth from the grassroots. Tianming looked stunned. He didn't dare to even imagine the scale of it. If we controlled the small players, would the great clans even matter anymore? I felt a surge of adrenaline. In my old world, we called this surrounding the cities from the countryside. It was about uniting every force that could be united. The great clans were the ultimate landlords, the ones who needed to be toppled. Everyone else was a potential ally. For now, I was acting as their factory. I held a monopoly on the production technology. By the time the great clans tried to catch up, I would bury them in a price war they couldn't survive. "Our production costs for hemp cloth are about 100 won per bolt," I explained. "It's cheaper because hemp is tougher and easier to process than silk. Do you understand now?" Tianming nodded slowly. "I think so. You want to expand?" "Exactly," I said. "Aside from our branches in the western regions and the grasslands, I want the Great Tang Trading Guild to hit every silk and hemp-producing region in the empire." We set up hidden offices. We use a different name so we don't draw fire too early. Then, we approach the local small families. I laid out the pitch for him. Tell them we'll process their silk for 101 and their hemp for 80. We do the work. We provide the efficiency. I told him to mobilize old Lou's workshop. Those new looms and spinning machines needed to be shipped to the production zones as fast as possible. Also, I added, start producing silk cotton blends. Use stone-milled lubrication. No limit on the colors. Tian Ming's eyes lit up as he did the math. The empire produced tens of millions of bolts of cloth every year. Even if we only cleared a small profit per bolt, we were looking at 700,000 strings of cash. That was nearly a tenth of the entire empire's annual tax revenue. In the modern world, a logistics system that spanned a nation was worth trillions. Here, I was building that foundation. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the cohesion. Even if the trading guild vanished tomorrow, the network of people I was binding together would remain. That was true power. Take my personal seal, I said, waving a hand. Write the letters and send them out immediately. I didn't care about my reputation. Being a prince was a tool, and I was going to use it. In this era, no one would partner with a business that didn't have a powerful background. They'd just be eaten alive. By using my seal, I was telling these small families that they were partnering with royalty. For them, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Yes, Your Highness. Tian Ming bowed. As he hurried off, I turned my focus back to my other projects. Soap was a gold mine, practically a license to print money, but I had to be careful. The chemical process produced glycerin, and without better equipment, it was dangerous. Glass, however, was moving faster. I spent the next 2 days staring at a sheet of green glass pressed onto an iron plate. In my old life, cheap window glass was often green because of iron impurities. This batch was already much clearer, though a bit rough. We have the process down, I told the workers. Start blowing the glass. We need cups, bottles, and jars. These are luxury items, so don't worry about mass production yet. Focus on quality. But the real prize took another 3 days, the silver mirror. Tian Ming gasped when he saw it. The combination of mercury and glass created something magical. He had never seen his own reflection so clearly. How many do we have? I asked. 7 full-length mirrors like this one, Your Highness, he reported. 30 medium ones, and 11 the size of a wash basin. Good. Seal the workshop, I ordered. I want the blacksmiths and masons to build a wall around the glass factory. No one gets in. Train the workers, but keep the formula secret. Now, load the mirrors onto the carriages. It's time to make some real money. I wasn't going far to sell them. Chang'an was the wealthiest city in the world. There was more than enough gold right here. But every great product needs a celebrity endorsement. And who better than my dear old man? It was late afternoon when I arrived at the palace. I headed straight for the Liangyi Hall, where my father, Li Shimin, usually handled his affairs. The emperor is in the inner chambers, a young eunuch whispered. The empress is feeling unwell today. I nodded. Empress Zhangsun had been frail since giving birth to Princess Xinqing last winter. In a commoner's house, she probably wouldn't have survived this long. I knew from history she only had about a year left. That was likely why she was so desperate to see my sister, Lizzie, married off soon. Understood, I said. I motioned to my guards, who were lugging several heavy crates. Follow me. It was time to show the emperor the future. I couldn't exactly bring these things by horse and carriage. They were far too fragile. Instead, I had my men carry them in specially made crates, moving with the kind of caution you'd give to a box of newborn kittens. I arrived at Lijing Hall with my small army of guards. Before I even stepped through the gates, my father, Li Shimin, had already received word of my arrival. He was waiting for me, looking skeptical. Li Ke, what are you doing here with all these crates? He asked, his voice echoing across the courtyard. Empress Zhangsun was there too. She hadn't been feeling well lately, but she was resting in the small garden near the moon gate. When she heard my father's grumpy tone, she just smiled softly. Now, Erlang, she said, using his pet name to calm him down. Don't be angry. He must have a reason for coming. Besides, he hasn't caused any trouble for at least a few days, right? My father looked at her, completely speechless. Is your bar for him really that low now? You're satisfied just because he hasn't started a fight in 48 hours. The Empress just chuckled. One must learn to be content with the small things. I walked up to them, feeling pretty smug. From a distance, The procession of crates looked impressive. I knew my cheap, old man was curious, even if he was pretending to be annoyed. I wanted to show him exactly how I was going to make a fortune. I also wanted to send a silent message to the Johnson family. I didn't need their politics to be powerful. But my father didn't even give me a chance to open my mouth. As soon as I got close, he barked at me. Li Ku, I haven't come looking for trouble with you yet, and you actually dare to show your face here? I froze in my tracks. My mind raced. Had I done something wrong recently? No, I'd been on my best behavior. Was he just having a bad day and looking for a punching bag? It wouldn't be the first time. What are you standing there for? Get over here, he roared. What's your problem, Dad? I shouted back, staying exactly where I was. I haven't done anything. Oh, really? He let out a cold laugh. Then tell me, why weren't you at the morning court session yesterday? I blinked. Oh, right. Court. I had completely forgotten that was a thing I was supposed to do. But I couldn't tell him that. That would be like handing him a stick to beat me with. I puffed out my chest and acted indignant. Dad, you can't blame me for that. What's the point of me going to court anyway? I told you last time, I'm a prince. It's one thing for people to call me Your Highness, but do you really expect me to handle government affairs? I'd just be in the way. My father rolled his eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. You really think too highly of yourself if you think you'd be important enough to be in the way. The Empress watched us, clearly amused. She knew my father wasn't actually furious. If he were, he would have sent guards to drag me to the palace yesterday. He was just blowing off steam. Fine, fine, my father sighed, waving me over. Stop talking nonsense and get over here. What's in the boxes? These? I grinned, my confidence returning. I brought these for you. Well, mostly for the Empress. The Empress looked curious. Oh, let's see then. I signaled my guards. They stepped forward and carefully opened the largest crate. They pulled out a tall, rectangular object and began assembling a wooden frame. The wood was high-quality swanji, cheaper than the rare sandalwood of the future, but still beautiful and sturdy. Once the frame was set, they lifted the full-length mirror into place. A thick red silk cloth covered the glass. I walked over and grabbed the edge of the silk. I brought this to the Empress first for 2 reasons, I explained. First, because she's the mother of the nation. And second, well, because I'm hoping my father will be impressed enough to pay me for the rest. I yanked the cloth away. The Empress let out a sharp gasp. Even my father, the great emperor of the Tang dynasty, nearly jumped back. He managed to keep his cool, but his eyes were wide with shock. In front of them was a reflection so clear it looked like another person was standing in the garden. In an era of blurry bronze mirrors and dark water reflections, this was magic. What is this? The Empress whispered, stepping closer. It's a crystal mirror, Mother, I said with a smile. I made it myself. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the smooth surface. She looked at her own reflection, every detail of her hair, the fine silk of her robes, the light in her eyes, and she was breathless. No woman in this century had ever seen herself like this. I'm preparing a dowry for my sister, Lizzie, I said, sounding as sincere as possible. I poured every cent I had into developing this. I haven't even been able to pay my household servants for months. As soon as the first batch was ready, I brought the best one to you. The Empress looked at me with genuine pity. You poor child, I had no idea you were struggling so much. Tell me, how much would a mirror like this cost? I took a deep breath, ready to play my part. Every successful man has a virtuous woman behind him. My father is the emperor because you support him. You carry the weight of the palace on your shoulders every day. As your son, how could I possibly take money from you? I'm not just looking for a wife. I'm looking for someone as virtuous as you, so I can treat her the same way and give her the best things in the world. My father started out looking pleased. I was finally being a filial son, but as I kept talking, his expression shifted. He narrowed his eyes at me. Why do I feel like there's a trap hidden in all those compliments? He muttered. He was right to be suspicious. I was laying it on thick, but I had a plan. I wasn't going to charge the Empress, but I was definitely going to make sure my father's treasury felt the sting for the mirrors I planned to gift to the rest of the family. This was only the beginning of the hustle. I hadn't forgotten about the other imperial consorts. I made sure to mention that I had already prepared mirrors for all my father's other wives too. It was the duty of a son and a brother, after all. I stood there, looking incredibly solemn, and told them that while I might be a bit of a troublemaker, I was a man of responsibility. I promised I wouldn't let my duties slide. I said it with such righteous conviction that my father's face started to turn black. Li Shimin wasn't an idiot. He knew exactly what I was doing. He shot me a look that said, "Fine, you're hinting that I should be the one to pay, aren't you?" Old Kai, standing not far away, was struggling to hold back a laugh. He could hear it too. The problem for my father was that I had backed him into a corner. I had framed this so perfectly that he couldn't possibly refuse to step up without looking like a cheapskate. "Fine," Li Shimin finally snapped. I felt a massive wave of relief. "Dad, if you hadn't spoken up soon, I would have run out of breath." "You have a point," he continued, his voice dripping with a mix of annoyance and sarcasm. "This money shouldn't come from you, and it shouldn't come from your mother. I suppose that only leaves your dear old father to foot the bill." He looked like he wanted to kick me. I could tell what he was thinking. He realized I was well-read, but that didn't mean I wasn't still a little brat. Most people read books to cultivate their character. I clearly used my education as a weapon to squeeze money out of him. But he couldn't take it back now. "How much for all of them?" he asked, staring at the gold-framed mirror with a dark expression. "Not much," I said, holding up a finger. "Just 10,000 per mirror." 10,000? You call that not much?" His eyes nearly popped out of his head. "Wait, are you saying that's too high?" I teased. "Because if you think the value is that great, I could always raise the price." "But really, Dad, this is enough. These full-length mirrors are exclusively for the imperial family. No one else is allowed to use them." I got serious then. I explained that developing these mirrors had cost me 500,000 taels and 3 years of failed attempts before I finally succeeded. Li Shimin looked at the mirror, which was as tall as he was, and nodded slowly. He knew these weren't items I could just sell on the street. "How many in total?" he asked. 17, I replied instantly. He did the math in his head. I could see him realizing I had calculated this entire exchange long before I walked into the room. "So, your father owes you 170,000? He asked, squinting at me. I shook my head and looked him straight in the eye. "One of those mirrors is a gift of filial piety for you. You are a husband to these women and a father to us. You carry the weight of the entire Tang dynasty on your shoulders so that my brothers and I can live in peace. I see the gray hairs appearing on your head. Father, you work too hard. This gift doesn't even cover a fraction of what you've given us, but it's the best I can do." Li Shimin froze. Even Empress Zhang's son looked stunned. I didn't use fancy poetry or ancient quotes. I spoke plainly, from the heart. It actually touched him. He looked at me for a long moment, then let out a cold snort to hide his emotions. "You think I'm short on cash?" he grumbled, though his tone had softened. "I'll give you 200,000. At least you have a conscience and remembered your mother and sisters." "Thank you, father," I said, bowing deeply. Then, I let a look of shame wash over my face. "Actually, I feel guilty taking this money for myself. I want to use it to do something for the people. I hope you'll give me your blessing." Empress Zhangsun was moved. "What is it, Kur?" I explained that as the Tang dynasty grew stronger and Chang'an became more crowded, the number of orphans and refugees was skyrocketing. I told them how I'd seen people freezing to death outside the city walls. Where there is light, there is shadow, but if the shadow grows too large, it threatens the stability of the capital and my father's reputation. "I want to use this money to build the Great Tang Royal Welfare Park near the Wei River," I said firmly. Li Shimin frowned. "And what exactly would that be?" I told him I wanted to move my workshops and businesses into this park and primarily hire refugees and orphans. If these kids grew up on the streets, they'd just become thugs and criminals. But if I took them in, fed them, and gave them work they could actually do, they could grow up to be productive citizens or even soldiers for the army. It was a way to solve the problem at the root. Li Shimin and the Empress exchanged a look. They were impressed. In a city of over 1 million people, crime and poverty were constant headaches for the local governors. Street gangs and foreign spies thrived in the slums. Every year, officials complained about it, but their only solution was more guards and harsher punishments. My plan was different. I wasn't just looking at the symptoms, I was looking at the cause. Other officials saw refugees as a burden, but I saw them as a resource. "Not bad," Li Shimin said, his eyes gleaming with newfound respect. "You've finally come up with a decent idea. I knew I couldn't just take the court's money for this project. If I did, the officials would have their eyes on my business secrets, and if things went south, I'd be the first one they'd execute for wasting state funds. Besides, if the government paid for it, who would really own it in the end? Father, this is my personal contribution to you and Mother," I said, keeping my voice humble. "I don't want to use the Treasury's money. It feels wrong. Think of this as a trial run. I'll test the method first to see if it actually works. If it does, you can order others to follow suit later." Li Shimin looked intrigued. "Go on." "The factories and workshops I plan to build will require a lot of capital," I explained. "The goal isn't just to feed these people for free. The government can't afford to be a charity forever. I want to give them skills and jobs so they can support themselves. Since I'm not sure how it will turn out yet, I'll take the risk. I just need your blessing, Father. If you give me your personal handwriting for the sign, the refugees will see your mercy and know you haven't forgotten them." I was practically forcing myself to speak like a scholar now, using all the right formal phrases. It worked. Li Shimin nodded, looking genuinely pleased. He couldn't find a single flaw in my logic. I could see him thinking that if I acted like this all the time, he'd have a lot fewer headaches. "Fine," Li Shimin said. "I'll write the inscription for you. It's a noble cause. Then I'll go to the Chang'an County Magistrate to buy the land for the first phase," I said, playing it smart by offering to pay. Li Shimin waved his hand dismissively. "Nonsense. You're doing this for the country with your own money. If I make you buy the land too, where would I put my face as emperor? Tomorrow, I'll issue a decree. The magistrate will set aside 10,000 mu of land for your project. If it fails, consider the land a gift to you." I pretended to look hesitant. "But Father, that's too much." "Take it," Empress Zhang's son said with a smile. "Don't refuse your father's kindness." "Then I won't be polite," I grinned, giving the Empress a mental thumbs up. She really knew how to back me up. "Father, why don't you write it now? I can get started the moment I get back." Li Shimin didn't hesitate. "Chang Lin, bring the ink and paper." In the late Sui and early Tang dynasties, Xian paper was already becoming common. It was the high-quality stuff used for painting and calligraphy. I watched as Chang Lin ground the ink, the rich scent filling the room. "What should I write?" Li Shimin asked, picking up the brush. "Right, the Great Tang Royal Welfare Park," I replied. "And if you don't mind, please sign it with your name." Li Shimin chuckled. "You've certainly put a lot of heart into this today. I'll write a few extra verses for you too." "No," I blurted out, stopping him mid-stroke. Li Shimin froze, his eyes narrowing. "You're refusing a gift of my calligraphy? Do you know how many people would die for this?" I couldn't tell him the truth, that the more he wrote, the harder he'd beat me once he realized I was using his name to build a massive commercial empire. I had to keep my Prince of Shu persona low-key and pathetic. "It's not that," I said quickly. "It's just, I haven't achieved anything yet. If I fail, having your extra verses there would just make you look bad for believing in me. Once I succeed, you can write for me for 3 days and 3 nights, and I won't say a word. Get out." Li Shimin laughed, cursing me playfully. "Asking me to write for 3 days? Forget it then." He finished the main inscription and set the brush down. I took the paper, feeling like I'd just secured a golden shield. "I'll be going now," I said, bowing. "I'll leave you and Mother to enjoy some quiet time together." Li Shimin stared at me. "What kind of nonsense is that?" "Oh, come on, Dad," I teased. "I might be young, but I've read books. Every woman wants her husband's affection. People will talk about your love for Mother for generations. I'll leave you to it." I gave them one last cheeky grin and bowed out. I left the mirrors behind as gifts and hurried out of the palace. As soon as I was 100 meters away, I let out a massive sigh of relief. I handed the calligraphy to my guard. "Get this back to the estate immediately," I whispered. "Find a massive stone and get the best carver in the city. Tell them to wait for my orders." Back in the garden, my nonsense had actually worked. Li Shimin dismissed the servants, leaving only him and the Empress. He stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her in a rare moment of genuine, quiet affection. It had been years since they'd been this close outside of their private chambers. Meanwhile, I made my way toward the residences of my sisters. Chang'e, Qingyang, and Jinyang lived near the Empress's quarters. Changle was the oldest and had her own palace, while the younger two were usually glued to her side. I found them in a small side garden. Qingyang and Jinyang were running around, laughing, while Changle sat nearby, playing the zither. The moment the two little ones saw me, they stopped what they were doing and sprinted toward me. Third brother, they shouted, their tiny feet thumping against the grass. I smiled and knelt down, ready to be tackled by the only people in this palace who didn't want something from me. I scooped them both up, one in each arm. Qingyang was a bit shy. She was 5 or 6 years old and starting to understand social boundaries, but the Tang dynasty was relatively open-minded. She didn't pull away. Instead, Jinyang wrapped her tiny arms around my neck and spoke in a sweet, milky voice. Third brother, I missed you so much. Did you really miss me? I teased, grinning at her. Or did you just miss the toys I bring you? I missed you, Jinyang pouted. You're the only one who actually plays with us. Ninth brother won't even look at us, and big brother is always too busy. The ninth brother, she mentioned, was Li Ji, the future Emperor Gaozong. Right now, he was just an 8-year-old kid who took himself too seriously. I laughed and set the two little ones down on the grass. All right. I brought something special for you today. Their eyes lit up instantly. What is it? They shouted in unison. I waved my hand, and my guard stepped forward, carrying several heavy crates. Changle, who had been watching from the side, walked over with a curious expression. I didn't waste any time. I had the guards open the crates and pull out the glass mirrors. When the girls saw their own crystal-clear reflections in the silvered glass, they gasped. Jinyang and Qingyang let out high-pitched squeals of delight. Even Changle was stunned, her hand flying to her mouth as she stared at the mirror in disbelief. Well, I asked, feeling pretty smug. What do you think of my gift? I love it, Qingyang chirped. She and Jinyang immediately huddled in front of a mirror, making funny faces and admiring themselves. Changle stepped closer, her eyes wide. Third brother, this is incredible. What is it called? It's a mercury mirror, I whispered, leaning in so the little ones wouldn't hear. And it's the secret weapon I'm using to build your dowry. I've put a lot of work into this. Changle's eyes suddenly grew misty. None of her other brothers, not even the crown prince or the fourth prince, cared about her future like this. To them, she was just a sister to greet politely. To me, she was family I would protect at all costs. Brother, she said softly, her voice trembling. If things don't work out, I wouldn't mind marrying into the Zhangsun family if it saves you trouble. Don't talk like that, I snapped gently. Trust me, in a year, the Zhangsun family won't be able to match the dowry I'm building for you. Unless someone in their house is as much of a genius as I am. I put extra emphasis on the word genius. What I really meant was that unless there was another time traveler hiding in their estate, they didn't stand a chance. Changle nodded firmly, a small smile returning to her face. I have to go now, I told them. I have things to do, and I need to visit my mother. We want to go too. All 3 princesses shouted at once. Fine, let's go together, I laughed. Because I treated them so well, the 3 sisters were very close to my mother, Consort Yang. They often visited her when I wasn't around. Her palace was located to the right of the Liangyi Hall. In the Tang dynasty, the left was the side of honor, which was why Empress Zhongxuan's palace was on the left. The rules in the Tang court weren't as suffocating as they would become in later dynasties like the Ming or Qing. In fact, I was the one who had introduced many of the modern terms used in the palace, like Mother Empress or Mother Consort. I hadn't known the proper ancient etiquette when I first arrived, and by the time I learned, it was too late to change. Nobody had corrected me back then, so I just kept using them. As we reached the palace gates, I followed the one rule I couldn't break. Any prince or princess living outside the palace had to pay their respects to the empress before visiting other consorts. Mom, I'm here, I yelled at the top of my lungs as we approached my mother's quarters. Mom, we're here too, Jinyang and Qingyang chirped, mimicking my informal style. They technically shouldn't have been calling her mom, but in our little circle, nobody minded. Consort Yang hurried out of the palace. She was a gentle woman, favored by the emperor but never arrogant. She knew her place was delicate. Like the other consort Yang in the palace, the widow of the emperor's brother, my mother was a product of a political marriage. People in the future would claim Li Shimin was a womanizer with a thing for his relatives' wives, but I knew the truth. It was all about the clans. My mother came from the Sui dynasty's royal family, the Hongnongyang clan. Marrying her secured their support for the Tang throne. It was a game of power, and my mother played her role perfectly. She was the quiet, dutiful consort, which was exactly why the emperor loved her. Auntie, Chengal said, giving a proper, elegant bow. She was much better behaved than I was. Come in, my mother said, smiling warmly. Kurt, why did you bring so many things? I'm here to bring you gifts, I said with a mischievous grin. Gifts that my father bought for you. The emperor bought these? She looked stunned. My father wasn't exactly known for his shopping sprees. I had the guards bring the mirrors inside and showed her the silvered glass. Her reaction was the same as the others, pure amazement. You made this? She asked. I did. But father was so worried about you and the other consorts that he bought mirrors for everyone. I lied smoothly. You actually charged your own father money? My mother glared at me, though there was no real heat in it. She was a cautious woman by nature, and I was her polar opposite. I knew I'd given her plenty of gray hairs over the years, but she'd learned to live with my antics. Mom, it wasn't my idea. I protested, holding up my hands. I tried to give them to him for free, really, but he insisted. He said it was his responsibility as a man to provide for his family. You are his women and his daughters, I said, my voice steady and convincing. Spending money on your own family is only natural. It's the way of the world. I tried to refuse his gold, but he wouldn't hear of it. My mother, Consort Yang, shot me a look. I knew her well enough to know she only believed about 30% of what I was saying. She raised me. She knew exactly what kind of person I was. Auntie, Chengal chimed in, helping me out. Father bought these for you, so you should just accept them. Besides, it's only right that he pays my third brother. He spent a fortune making these, and it's not like he has a regular income. My mother laughed, shaking her head at us. You girls always take his side. I don't know what kind of spell he's cast on you. That's because third brother always brings us fun toys and delicious snacks. Jinyang added with a wide, innocent grin. I reached out and rubbed the heads of my two youngest sisters. I didn't spoil you two for nothing. In a few days, I'll bring you even more good things. Thank you, third brother. They didn't even pretend to be polite. They were already excited for the next surprise. We sat with my mother for about half an hour before Chengal took the younger girls and left. She was smart. She knew I had private matters to discuss with our mother. Chengal always had a sense for these things. It was one of the many reasons I was so determined to save her. A guy like Zhang Sun Chong didn't deserve a girl like her. As soon as the door closed, my mother's expression sharpened. You've meddled in Chengal's marriage with the Zhang Sun family again, haven't you? Meddled? Mother, that's a harsh word. I replied casually. As her brother, I'm just looking out for her future. She hesitated, a sigh escaping her lips. Life in the palace was complicated. We all shared a father, but having different mothers meant there were invisible lines drawn between us. My mother had lived through the fall of one dynasty and the rise of another. She had seen too much blood and betrayal. But I didn't care about those lines. I treated everyone the same, including the crown prince, Li Chengqian. Well, everyone except Li Tai, but that was because he was a jerk to me first. I've always lived by a simple rule. If you're good to me, I'm good to you. I was particularly hard on my full-blooded younger brother, Li Yin, though. Mother saw it too. If I didn't keep him in check, he'd actually ruin his life. Unlike me, Li Yin caused trouble without a plan. When I broke the rules, I did it with a purpose. My mother sighed again. She knew why I was so good to the sisters. It wasn't just affection, it was a shield for her. Because of her past as a Sui princess, she was often marginalized in the harem. By staying close to the emperor's daughters and keeping Empress Zhang Sun happy, I was making sure my mother was protected. I might act like a hooligan, but I knew how to carry the weight of this family. Mother, why the sigh? I asked, changing the subject. By the way, has Li Yin been asking you for money lately? I remembered Chengal mentioning that Li Yin had been begging her for cash. As the eldest legitimate princess, Chengal was spoiled by our father and had a massive private stash. No, I listened to you. I didn't give him a cent, she said, looking frustrated. Li Yin was a disappointment. Years ago, my mother had to sell her own jewelry just to fund his lifestyle because we were broke. Even the empress was frugal back then because of the natural disasters hitting the empire. Good. I said, cracking my knuckles. I'll go have a heart-to-heart talk with him later. Go easy on him, she muttered. Don't hit him where the bruises will show. If he's afraid of looking bad, he shouldn't cause trouble, I countered. Look at me. I get beaten by father all the time. Do I look like I care about my reputation? I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. Mother, I need a favor. She looked curious. I rarely asked her for anything. I want you to invite the wives of the high-ranking officials over. Have a ladies' party. And then, she asked, show off. I said, pointing to the full-length mirror. Flaunt it. Make them green with envy. She wasn't slow. She caught on immediately. You and your schemes. Fine, I'll do it. Great. I'm heading out to find Changle. She has plenty of friends too. My mother smiled as I rushed out. She knew I couldn't sit still for long, but she appreciated that I actually spent time with her. Most princes who moved out of the palace barely visited their mothers. I'm leaving the rest of the mirrors here. I called out over my shoulder. Distribute them to the other consorts. Tell them they're gifts from father. My mother watched me go, a bittersweet look in her eyes. She knew that if she were the empress, I would have been the perfect crown prince. I was loud and rowdy, but I thought of every detail. By letting her distribute the mirrors as gifts from the emperor, I was giving her immense social capital in the harem. Every consort would owe her a favor. I caught up with Changle and the little ones. Changle, I need a hand. Whatever you need, third brother, she said. Invite your friends over. Show them your mirror. When they ask where to get one, tell them they're for sale at the someplace and... She grinned, her eyes turning into crescents. She caught the vibe instantly. I get it. But, do you have any small mirrors? I want to go visit our eldest sister-in-law first. I gave her a massive thumbs up. My sister was a genius. The sister-in-law was the crown princess, Lady Su. Li Chengxian had just married her in the first month of the year, and he absolutely adored her. Her family was influential, and as the crown princess, her social circle was the most powerful in the capital. If Lady Su started using my mirrors, every noblewoman in the Tang dynasty would be banging down my door by sunset. It was the perfect marketing strategy. Once the crown princess had won, every one of my brother's concubines would be desperate to buy their own. Lizzie, my clever little sister, gave me a mischievous look. She had spent so much time around me that she was starting to pick up my modern slang and habits. I get it now, she whispered, leaning in. You're helping sister-in-law keep the peace in the harem by making sure everyone looks their best. Right. I laughed and gave her a pat on the head. Exactly. I'll send a large, high-quality mirror over to your place later today. You're amazing, third brother, she said, her voice dropping even lower. I can't believe you actually managed to trick father out of 200,000 strings of cash. I shot her a mock glare. Trick? What a terrible word to use. That wasn't a trick, Lizzie. That was paternal love. Don't you see? Father just wants us to be happy. She giggled, her eyes crinkling into crescents. She knew exactly what I was doing, but she loved the chaos of it. Then, her expression turned serious. But brother, why are you taking in all those orphans and refugees? They're a bottomless pit for money. And what is this Great Tang Welfare Industrial Park you keep talking about? I gave her a knowing smirk. You wouldn't understand yet. Selling goods is fine, but if you really want to make the big bucks, you get into real estate. Real estate? She tilted her head, confused by the term. Don't worry about it, I said, waving her off. In a few months, you'll see. By then, the Zhangsun family won't even be a blip on our radar. She nodded vigorously. I believe you, third brother. I left the palace and headed straight for the someplace inn in the Shanha district. My steward, Tian Ming, was already waiting for me. We had secured 10,000 acres of land. In modern terms, that was over 5 square kilometers, roughly the size of the initial high-tech zones back in my old world. It was more than enough space for what I had planned. We can start moving the scented soaps in here, I told Tian Ming as we walked the grounds. Remember, use different molds. We need to create tiers of quality. The packaging is everything. People need to feel like they're buying luxury. I was holding back on the regular laundry soap for now. I needed it for a different project, degreasing wool. Right now, the Turkic tribes used wool for everything, but they didn't know how to strip the oils. The smell was unbearable. You could smell a Turkic nomad from 50 yards away if the wind was blowing the wrong way. Even the nobles in Chang'an who bathed daily couldn't get rid of that stench for years. But if I could degrease the wool, I could turn it into high-end textiles that would rival silk in profit. Understood, Highness, Tianming said, taking a deep breath. What about the furniture for the guest rooms? Should I order custom tables and chairs? I'll handle the furniture, I said, dismissing the question. I've got a source. Just focus on the windows and doors. This is our flagship project, Tianming. It has to be perfect. I won't let you down, he promised. Good. I'm heading over to Bright Moon Tower for a meal and some entertainment. Tianming blinked, looking at the sun. This early, Highness? The girls won't even be ready yet. The brothels don't usually open until evening. I looked at him with pure disdain. What do you know? I'm going to appreciate the artistic talents of the top courtesans. You think this is just about girls? You're too vulgar, Tianming. You don't understand my refined intentions. My apologies, Highness, he said quickly. I was shallow. I hopped onto my horse. I preferred riding to carriages. The roads in this era were enough to rattle your ribs loose. I headed toward the Pingkong district. People might judge, but in the Tang dynasty, the entertainment districts were right next to the Imperial Academy. Even the great scholar Chu Suiliang lived in this neighborhood. Going to a flower house wasn't a scandal, it was a cultural experience. When I arrived at the gates of Bright Moon Tower, the attendants scrambled to greet me. Prince of Shu. Welcome, welcome, they chirped, bowing low. They didn't dare block my path. A few years ago, someone had tried. It didn't end well for them. After all, if I was willing to beat up the son of the most powerful official in the empire, a few bouncers weren't going to stop me. You're open early today, I noted, glancing at the bustling hall. It's the Cold Food Festival, Highness, one of the servants explained. Everyone is out and about. I nodded, forgetting the lunar calendar again. In this world, the day before the Qingming festival was for cold food and no fires. It was the perfect time for a prince to disappear into a crowd and enjoy the view. It turned out today was the Cold Food Festival. In the Tang dynasty, this day had evolved into a massive celebration. Beyond the traditional tomb sweeping, people went hiking, played football, and held cockfights. Life in Chang'an was vibrant, and a place like Bright Moon Tower wasn't about to let a business opportunity slip by. The festival made the atmosphere inside especially rowdy. It was ironic how a day meant for the dead ended up being so lively for the living. I didn't say a word and just walked inside. A sharp-eyed servant immediately shouted at the top of his lungs, His Highness, the Prince of Shu, has arrived. In the past, they didn't announce arrivals like this. People came here for fun, not to put on airs, and even the high-ranking officials liked to keep things low-key. But a while back, someone had tried to start trouble with me. The result? Bright Moon Tower had to close for the day because everyone was too busy watching the brawl. After that, Manager Liu learned his lesson. Whenever I showed up, he made sure everyone knew. It was a matter of survival for his furniture. I stepped into the main hall and was greeted by a sea of people. It was still early, but several tables were already packed. I scanned the room and spotted a few familiar faces from the capital's elite circles. Yo, the Prince of Shu is here. A burly young man shouted from a nearby table. I raised an eyebrow. It was Cheng Huaoliang, the second son of the Duke of Lu, Cheng Yaojin. In the history I knew, he was supposed to marry Princess Qinghe, but since I'd been busy sabotaging the marriage between my sister and Zhang's son Cheng, everything was in flux. Qinghe's mother wasn't even a high-ranking consort, so she lived a quiet life on the fringes of the palace. I'd sent her gifts before because she was my sister, but we weren't close. What are you lot doing here? I asked, walking over and taking a seat at their table. Sitting with him was Yuchi Baolin, the son of the legendary General Yuchi Gong. He was 26, already held an official post, and was definitely old enough to know better than to be here this early. Beside him was Qin Huaidao, the son of Qin Xiong. They both stood up and bowed to me respectfully. We were just bored, Highness, Yuchi Baolin said with a grin. It's a holiday. Plus, word on the street is you told the Crown Prince that Bright Moon Tower has a new top courtesan. We wanted to see what the fuss was about. I rolled my eyes. Cut the crap. I can see there are plenty of new faces here today. I got along well with the sons of these generals. We were all cut from the same cloth. The scholars and literary types, however, looked down on me. They thought I was a brute, even more uncivilized than their fathers. I found it hilarious. We were all in a brothel. Who were they kidding? Actually, I went looking for you earlier, but you weren't in the city, Yuchi Balin whispered, leaning in. When it comes to these houses, you're the expert. We were hoping you'd show us the ropes. Screw off. I snapped, though I was half smiling. Highness, I heard Du He and Fong Ei are coming later tonight, Yuchi Balin added, his voice dropping lower. Are we going to give them a hard time? I tapped the table rhythmically. Give them a hard time? Do I look like a violent person to you? Why does everyone think I just go around bullying people? Yuchi Balin, Li Dijian, and Qin Huaidao all stared at me. Their expressions said it all. They really wanted to ask me to remove the word not from that sentence. Suddenly, a drunken, slurred voice drifted down from the balcony above. The Prince of Shu? What does he know? That brat doesn't know the first thing about refined company. I looked up, my eyes narrowing. Great. Someone was asking for a beating. A stumbling figure was making his way down the stairs. It was barely afternoon, and this guy was already wasted. Judging by his expensive silk robes, he was royalty. Most commoners wouldn't dare insult me to my face. As he turned his head, I recognized him immediately. It was Li Yuanshang, the Prince of Lu. He was my father's seventh brother, my uncle. Though technically my elder, he was only a year older than me. I didn't say a word. I just stood up. Wait. Yuchi Balin grabbed my arm, looking panicked. Samlang, bro, I'll call you big brother, okay? Didn't you just say you weren't violent? Forget it, he's drunk. Besides, he's your uncle. If you hit him, the emperor will lose his mind. I looked at Yuchi Balin coldly. Who said I was going to hit him? Am I a violent person? I shook his hand off. They knew my temper. I was wilder than any of these military brats. I hadn't punched a member of the royal family yet, but that didn't mean I wouldn't start today. I reached down, grabbed a full jar of wine from the table, and started walking toward the stairs. Don't. I'm begging you. Qin Huaidao tried to block me. One hit with that jar, and he's dead. Li Yuanshang continued to stumble down, oblivious. What? Is the Prince of Shu going to lay hands on his own uncle? Manager Lu, the man in charge of the tower, came running out, sweating bullets. Highness, please, I beg you. He's just a drunk. Don't lower yourself to his level. It's not worth it. Highness, the others chimed in. I ignored them. I looked at the wine jar in my hand, then at the surrounding nobles who were all watching with bated breath. Balin, I said with a cold smirk. Everyone knows I have a very low tolerance for alcohol. Before anyone could react, I lifted the heavy jar and began chugging the wine. Tang Dynasty wine wasn't distilled yet. It was weak, maybe 15 to 20% alcohol at most. I had tested my limits before. I could drink several jars of this stuff without feeling a thing, aside from a bloated stomach and a frequent need for the bathroom. I hated the taste of alcohol, but in this world, if you didn't drink, you couldn't bond with the soldiers. But today, I had a different reason for drinking. I needed an excuse. If I was drunk, whatever happened next wouldn't be my fault. The crowd of noble brats stared at me, jaws dropping. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. I didn't care. I tilted the heavy jar back and let the wine flow down my throat like water. I was an expert at acting. Years of experience had taught me exactly how to look the part. I slammed the empty jar onto the floor. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. I let out a long, loud burp and spat on the ground. My eyes went blurry and unfocused. I looked like a man who had completely lost his mind to the bottle. The girls in the tower watched me with wide eyes. To most of the powerful men who came here, these women were just property. They were goods to be bought and sold. But I always treated them like human beings. I spoke to them as equals, with genuine respect. Because of that, every girl in this building wanted to be in my bed. They had seen me scrap before, but they had never seen me do something this reckless. Li Yuanshang stood there, his fake bravado vanishing instantly. He wasn't nearly as drunk as he pretended to be. He hated me, though I hadn't realized it until now. A few years back, I had beaten his servants in the middle of the street. They were trying to negotiate a marriage with a commoner's daughter. It was just a polite way of saying they were kidnapping her. I stepped in and saved her, and Li Yuanshang never forgot that. He thought I was targeting him on purpose. He knew he couldn't touch me directly since I was the emperor's son, and he was just a brother, so he stayed close to the crown prince instead. He thought his status as my uncle would protect him today. He thought I wouldn't dare strike an elder. He was wrong. "Liku, what are you doing?" he shouted. His voice cracked with fear. He turned to bolt for the stairs. I was faster. I lunged forward, stumbling like a drunkard, and grabbed him firmly by the collar. I yanked him backward with a violent jerk. "Bullying your juniors, are you?" I roared. "Taking advantage of your position? Think you're untouchable?" I slammed him to the floor and climbed on top of him. My fists started flying. No one moved. The nobles and scholars stood frozen, watching the violence unfold. Who would dare interfere in a fight between two princes? If they accidentally touched one of us during the struggle, their heads would roll. Especially me. They knew my reputation. If the Prince of Shu was in a drunken rage, you stayed out of his way. Li Yuanchang was a scholar. He prided himself on his calligraphy and painting. He looked down on me as a brute, a stain on the royal family's dignity. But right now, my brutality was the only thing he could feel. I knew exactly where to hit. I had been fighting since I was 9 years old. I had beaten Zhang Sunchong over 100 times in my life. I was an expert in pain. I knew how to strike so it hurt like hell without actually breaking any bones or causing permanent damage. Manager Liu rushed to Yuchi Baolin, his face pale with terror. "Please, young master, I beg you, stop the Prince of Shu." Baolin just shook his head and backed away. He knew me better than anyone. If he tried to stop a drunk, Liku, he'd be the next one on the floor. I was stronger and more experienced than any of these military brats. I never slacked on my training because I knew I couldn't afford to lose a fight. Manager Liu's face turned into a mask of pure misery. In his eyes, I was usually the best royal to deal with. I didn't put on airs and I was easy to please. But when I decided to cause trouble, I caused the biggest trouble imaginable. He probably wondered if his tower would even be standing by the time I was finished. "I'm sorry, I was wrong," Li Yuanchang screamed. He clearly didn't have the experience Zhang Sunchong had. If this were Zhang Sunchong, he would have curled into a ball, protected his face, and waited for me to get tired. He would have just accepted his fate. But my uncle just kept yelping and flailing. I didn't stop. I had a role to play, and I was going to play it until my knuckles were sore. Li Yuanchang tried to fight back, twisting his body and flailing his arms to push me off. I wasn't having it. I straddled him, pinning his torso down with my legs like a vice. He could wiggle all he wanted, but he couldn't dodge my fists. If Zhang Sunchong had been there, he would have told my uncle to just give up. He would have said, "Why bother? Just let him hit you until he's finished." I finally stopped, letting out a long, heavy breath. I stood up, wiping my brow. Beating someone while pretending to be drunk was actually exhausting work. I stood up a bit too fast, and a wave of dizziness hit me. I swayed on my feet, pointing a shaky finger at my uncle. "Go ahead," I slurred. "Oh, you better go tell my father right now. Don't wait until tomorrow. It'll be too late." I stumbled, nearly losing my balance. Yuchi Baolin rushed over and caught my arm to steady me. I just shook him off and pointed at Li Yuanchang again. "Wait, no, don't go to my dad. Go to my grandfather. I'm the one who should go find my father." Baolin nearly choked, trying to hold back a laugh. "Your Highness, do you think this is a playground fight? You're both going to run to your parents." The crowd around us was struggling too. They were turning red, desperate to laugh, but terrified of the consequences. If they laughed now, they might be the next ones running home to their fathers with a black eye. Li Yuanchang opened his mouth to say something. His face flushed a deep, angry crimson. A massive bruise was already blooming on his left cheek. He clearly wanted to drop some parting threats, but looking at my drunken state, he lost his nerve. He scrambled to his feet and fled the tower in total disgrace. Manager Liu finally breathed a sigh of relief. He wasn't worried about retaliation. This mess wasn't the brothel's fault, and if a royal tried to shut him down over a drunken brawl, it would be a public embarrassment for them. Besides, the local officials usually looked out for him. But his biggest safety net was me. Everyone knew the Prince of Shu was a troublemaker, but he never let innocent bystanders take the fall for his messes. If someone tried to bully the shop because of me, I'd be the first one there to settle the debt. I waved Baolin away, looking at him with pure disdain. "I can't stand you people. So fake." I turned to the room, my voice loud and mocking. Everyone knows why you're here at a place like this. You're obsessed with these women, but you act like you're so refined and elegant. It's pathetic. Balin groaned. Your Highness, the Prince of Lu was the one who annoyed you. Why are you coming for me now? Up on the stage, the top courtesans giggled behind their sleeves. They weren't offended. They were amused. I ignored Balin and stumbled toward the central high platform where the performers stood. Ching Chun, I called out. Help me up. I'm coming, Your Highness, one of the beauties chirped. Her face lit up with genuine joy. She didn't hesitate for a second, rushing down and grabbing my arms to help me up the steps. She guided me to a chair and sat me down gently. Are you all right, Your Highness? Does your hand hurt? Let me see. All four of the top courtesans swarmed me, chirping with concern and fussing over my knuckles. Seeing this, Balin and the other young nobles looked like they wanted to die of envy. These weren't your average street-level girls. These women were elite. They might eventually become a high-ranking official's concubine, but they didn't just sleep with anyone who walked through the door. You couldn't force them either, not unless you wanted to face a kidnapping charge. In the Tang dynasty, these women were technically free citizens, and their establishments were for music and conversation, not just sex. They were talented, beautiful, and highly selective. Most nobles spent months just trying to get a smile out of them. But with me, they were practically tripping over each other to be near me. It wasn't just my title. Crown Prince Li Chengxian and my brother Li Tai had both visited this place before. The girls were always polite to them, but that was it. To see them this genuinely worried about a man, it was enough to drive the other patrons crazy. I waved the girls off to show I was fine, then pointed at the scholars below. Stop being so hypocritical. If you want them, just say it. You act so high and mighty, but you don't even have the balls to admit why you're drinking here. Are you even men? I was insulting every person in the room, but they were used to it. That was just the Prince of Shu being the Prince of Shu. Most of them just grumbled under their breath about me having no class. You guys, I sighed, shaking my head. If you like someone, you have to understand what's in their heart. You don't have a clue what they're thinking, yet you expect them to invite you into their private quarters? And you call yourselves learned scholars? Then tell us, Your Highness. One scholar challenged, half mocking and half curious. Since you're so wise, what exactly are they thinking? I looked at the women surrounding me. They were all looking at me with shy, expectant eyes. Each one was a natural beauty, better than any filtered influencer from my old world. It was the peak of feudal corruption, and I loved every second of it. Even the girls seemed curious to hear my answer. I smiled and began to recite, my voice steady despite the act. Before the clouds of youth have faded, she learns the songs and dances. Before the guests, she smiles and gives herself away, hiding the sorrow of 1,000 pieces of gold. She fears the time will slip away too fast, wasting her beauty in the shadows. If she finds a true heart, why not leave this world of flowers and mist behind? Why let the world see her only as a passing cloud or morning rain? As I spoke, the girls' eyes grew brighter and brighter. By the time I finished, they were practically glowing. Yang Anning, the most sensitive of the group, already had tears shimmering in her eyes. Below the stage, the scholars were stunned into silence. They looked at each other, confused and humbled. Was this really the same brute Prince of Shu? They had never heard those words before, but the raw emotion in them hit harder than any of my punches ever could. The scholars were stunned. They knew me as the brute Prince of Shu, a man who solved problems with his fists, not a poet who understood the hidden sorrows of a woman's heart. But the words I had just recited weren't mine. In my head, I gave a silent nod to Lu Yong, the legendary poet from the future. He was the undisputed king of the brothels, and his verses were like a cheat code for winning over women. I had adapted his poem, Mi Xian Yong, to fit the Tang dynasty. I spoke of a girl who hadn't even reached her 15th birthday before she was forced to pin up her hair and learn the songs of the pleasure quarters. I spoke of the fear of fading beauty and the desperate hope of finding one man who saw her as a human being, not just a passing cloud. Your Highness, Yang Anning whispered. Her voice was so soft and sweet it could melt bone. She and the other girls were literate. They understood every layer of meaning I had laid out. To them, these weren't just rhymes. They were a lifeline. My friends Yuchi Baolin, Qin Huaidao, and Li Dijian stood there like idiots. Baolin started bragging about my great talent, even though I knew he hadn't understood a single word. He didn't care about poetry. He just liked that I was winning. Meanwhile, the scholars below the stage looked like they had swallowed charcoal. I had stolen the spotlight and their dignity in one breath. "Don't think I'm a good man just because of a few words," I said, leaning back with a smirk. "People are complicated. Who knows if I'm just hiding something filthy behind this face?" "Your Highness," Yang Anning said, her eyes steady and fierce. "If a man hides his desires, it's filth. But if you speak them openly, it's called being upright. Even if you have filthy intentions for me, I would give you my life willingly." The manager of the house, old Lu, looked like he was about to faint. He could see his top earners falling for me right before his eyes. If I kept this up, he wouldn't have a business left. Suddenly, a voice shouted from the crowd of scholars. "Fine then. If I say I want to sleep with you, Anning, is that being upright?" Anning didn't blink. She gave him a cold, professional smile. "It is. But that doesn't mean I have to agree." The guy choked on his own breath, silenced by the double standard. Anning then turned to old Lu and told him the sisters weren't feeling well and wanted to close the doors to all guests for the day. Old Lu, sensing the mood, immediately bowed to the crowd and announced he was picking up the tab for everyone's drinks as an apology. He ushered the disgruntled scholars out, leaving only me and my 3 friends in the massive hall. "What are you guys still doing here?" I asked, looking at Baolin and the others. "Waiting for me to sing you a lullaby?" Right, Li Dijian stammered. "We'll head over to the Manhwa building instead. Plenty of other places in the district." They scrambled out, leaving the Huiyue building eerily quiet. It was the middle of the day, so the usual rush hadn't started yet. Old Lu approached me cautiously. He had lived through the fall of the Sui dynasty and the rise of the Tang. He knew how to read the wind. "Your Highness, shall I escort you upstairs to rest?" he asked. "No need for upstairs," I said, clapping my hands. "Call all the girls down. I want everyone here." I still wasn't used to the Tang terminology. Calling young women lady or little lady felt stiff, but I had a goal. I had been scouting this place for a long time. The Huiyue building had the highest quality performers in the entire capital, rivaled only by 2 other houses. As the girls filed down, giggling and greeting me with familiar smiles, I nodded to myself. I wasn't just here to play. I had a plan for these women, and it was time to see if my investment was finally going to pay off. The reason I chose the Huiyue building was simple. It didn't have a real master. In the Pingkong district, every brothel has a powerful backer pulling the strings from the shadows, taking the lion's share of the profits. But the Huiyue building was different. Its previous owner had fallen from power years ago. Because the business was stable and the former owner had kept a low profile, nobody realized the seat was empty. I only found out by accident through my intelligence network at the ULIN. "Everyone, find a seat," I said, flashing a smile. "Let's have a chat." I dropped the act of being drunk. These women were sharp. They knew exactly when to speak and when to keep their mouths shut. I looked around the room at the gathered performers. "I have a question," I started, my voice calm. "Have any of you ever thought about your future?" One of the girls laughed, but the sound was bitter. "Your Highness, of course we've thought about it. But what's the use? We are outcasts. The best we can hope for is to find a decent man to take us in as a lowly concubine. That's the only ending for people like us." I knew their stories. Many were born into this life. Others were the wives and daughters of officials who had committed crimes. In the Tang dynasty, if your family fell, you were either sold into this trade or exiled. Most chose this life over exile. Exile meant being sent to the Lingnan region, the far south. In the modern world, that's a tropical paradise. In the Tang dynasty, it was a nightmare of malaria, poisonous insects, and rugged wilderness. At least in Chang'an, they had food and a roof over their heads. "Is that what you all think?" I asked, scanning the room. Old Lu sat nearby, looking like he had a thorn in his throat. He sensed something big was coming, and he couldn't stop it. "Your Highness, just tell us what you want," Yang Anning said, her voice steady. "We don't really have choices." I leaned back. What if you could live a different life? A life where no one looks down on you. Where you can walk the streets, buy what you want, fall in love, and start a real family. The room went dead silent. They wanted it, but they didn't believe it was possible. Old Lu finally spoke up, his voice trembling. Your Highness, you mean, all of them? Every single one, I said. The girls stared at me like I had grown a second head. Suddenly, one of the older women in the back, who looked to be in her 30s, shouted out, Your Highness, if you redeem all of us, can you even use that many women? I nearly choked on my own spit. I looked over at her. In this era, a woman in her 30s was practically a grandmother. She was bold, I'll give her that. What are you talking about? I snapped, my face darkening. I'm redeeming you to give you a better life. Do I look that desperate to you? But Your Highness, she teased, seeing I wasn't actually angry. We're very hard workers. We can be very useful. Enough of that, I said, waving her off. You don't understand. Once I redeem you, I'm going to find a way to change your legal status from outcasts to common citizens. I'll provide you with jobs. You'll be free to marry whoever you want. The laughter died instantly. They were stunned. To be a commoner was the ultimate dream. In the Tang Dynasty, your household registration was everything. You were either a free citizen who could head your own household, or you were an outcast, attached to a master or the state. These women were the latter, property, not people. I wasn't just being a nice guy. I needed a workforce, and I needed people who owed me their lives. These women were talented, educated in the arts, and knew how to handle people. They were the perfect foundation for the empire I was building in the shadows. In the Tang Dynasty, your status was everything. If you were a laborer, you were bound to a master. If you were an outcast, you weren't even a person, you were property. Even if I bought these women, they would simply transition from being the state's property to mine. Their legal status wouldn't change unless someone with immense power intervened. Luckily, I was the Prince of Shu. I had that power. The girls stood there, frozen in shock. I had just promised them the impossible. I didn't wait for them to process it. I looked over at the manager, a woman who had spent years navigating the dangerous waters of the capital. Manager Lu, we need to talk, I said. I turned and walked toward a private room. I didn't look back. I knew she would follow. Behind me, the hall erupted into hushed, frantic whispers. I heard one girl ask if I could actually afford to buy them all. Another mentioned she had saved up enough to buy her own freedom, but she had nowhere to go. They were scared, but for the first time, they were hopeful. Inside the room, I sat down and looked at Manager Lu. She looked tense, like a soldier waiting for an execution. The original owner of Hui Lu is long gone, isn't he? I asked. The color drained from her face. She shivered, then let out a long, ragged sigh. The facade she had maintained for years finally cracked. She nodded slowly. She told me how she had been struggling to keep the place running, using old favors and connections just to keep the officials from seizing it. It was a heavy burden for a woman alone. She looked relieved that the secret was finally out. I'm buying this place, I told her, but I'm keeping you on as the head manager. She blinked, confused. I told her she could keep all the profits the house had made over the years. I didn't want her money. I wanted the contracts of every person in this building. I wanted her loyalty. She agreed before I could even finish my sentence. She was smart. She knew that without a protector like me, she wouldn't last another month. Now, tell me about the girls, I said. She straightened up, her professional mask returning. She told me there were 32 performers in total. Then she added something that caught me off guard. Except for one who had been married before, they were all virgins. I stared at her. I thought I had misheard. This was a brothel, after all. But then I realized my modern bias was showing. In the high-end houses of the Tang Dynasty, the top-tier girls were artists. They were singers, dancers, and poets. Their purity was their greatest asset. It made them exclusive. It made them expensive. They were treated like rare masterpieces that people paid just to look at. Manager Lu saw my expression and got defensive. She thought I was questioning her word. She even joked that if I wasn't interested in the young girls, she was still available, despite being over 40. I cleared my throat, feeling a bit awkward. I'm not interested in their bodies, I snapped. I want to give them a better life. But I'm glad they've kept their dignity. It makes things easier. She continued the report. Including the servants and guards, there were 45 people under contract. She started to list the monthly earnings, but I held up a hand to stop her. Stop, I said. I don't care about the earnings. Because as of this moment, Hui Lulu is no longer in the entertainment business. Close the doors. We're done. I added one more thing to sweeten the deal. I told manager Lu that she could keep all the previous profits from Hui Lulu. I didn't want a single cent of it. I waved my hand dismissively as she stared at me in shock. I told her we were closing for business immediately. She looked stunned. She asked if I was serious. I nodded. From now on, this building was nothing more than a dormitory for the girls. I had new plans for them. I asked her if she knew about the Yujian and over in the Shanghai district. She nodded again. I told her that was my property. That was where they would be performing from now on. Manager Lu didn't understand my vision, but she didn't care to ask. She looked at me with a new kind of intensity. I could tell that from this day forward, Lu Ying was mine. She belonged to the Prince of Shu, body and soul. I told her to follow me out. As we stepped out of the room, the girls stopped their whispering instantly. Every pair of eyes in the room snapped toward me. I walked back onto the central stage and let a small smile spread across my face. I told them I had good news. I had just bought the entire Hui Lulu. I told them that, in a way, I had just redeemed all of them. The room exploded. A few girls screamed in joy. Others looked like they were about to collapse to their knees in gratitude. I raised my hand to quiet them down. They silenced themselves instantly, hanging on my every word. I laid out the new rules. First, Hui Lulu was closed to the public. It was their home now, not a business. They didn't seem surprised by that. I could see them wondering if I was just going to move them all into my palace. Then I told them the second part. They would still perform, but not here. They would move to the Yujian Inn. I explained that things would be different there. I would be the one deciding the schedule and the acts. The customers would be there to watch, and nothing else. I told them plainly that if any man tried to touch them or cause trouble, they didn't have to worry. I would handle it personally. The girls started murmuring excitedly. They knew my reputation. A promise from the Prince of Shu was worth its weight in gold. In the past, even if they kept their virginity, they still had to deal with drunks and bullies. If they resisted too hard, they got beaten. Sometimes, they were even killed, and the killers just paid a small fine and walked away. No one ever stood up for them. Now, they had a prince as their shield. But I wasn't finished. I told them they could keep every single cent of the tips they received. On top of that, I would pay them a monthly salary. I gave them 2 days off for every 10 days of work. And then, I dropped the biggest bombshell of all. I told them that after working for me for just 1 year, I would restore their status as common citizens. They would be free. Even during that year, they could live like normal people. If they found someone they loved, they could get married, and I would even provide their dowry. Yang Anning's eyes turned red. She looked like she was about to cry. For these women, legal freedom was a dream they never expected to reach. I had just handed it to them like it was nothing. I had given them a future. For the first time in their lives, they weren't property. They were people.